In fog-drenched London, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson unravel a chilling mystery. Ancient Egyptian statues whisper Khepri, a god's name, as blood-soaked symbols appear, carved by the shadowy Khepri's chosen. Racing against time, they uncover hidden chambers. A fifth guardian statue and a master fragment threatening to open the silent gate, a portal to unimaginable power. With a ruthless female leader slipping through their grasp, every step pulls them deeper into a deadly ritual that could reshape the world. Will Holmes stop the gate's awakening, or will Khepri rise? Chapter 1. The Midnight Whisper. The fog clung to London like a damp gray blanket, muffling the clatter of horse hooves and the creak of carriage wheels. It was late, far past the hour when decent folk locked their doors and snuffed their candles. The gas lamps flickered, casting weak pools of light that barely pushed back the gloom. At 221B Baker Street, a fire crackled in the hearth, its glow dancing across the cluttered room where Sherlock Holmes sat, his long fingers steepled under his chin. Holmes was restless, his sharp eyes, usually so quick to spot a clue in the chaos of the world, stared blankly at the fire. For days, no case had stirred his mind. No puzzle had come to challenge his restless brain. The world, it seemed, had grown dull, and London's criminals had taken a holiday. Watson, his friend and companion, sat across from him, a book open on his lap, though his eyes kept drifting to Holmes. He knew this mood. Holmes was a hound without a scent, a mind starved for a mystery. The clock on the mantel struck midnight, its chimes heavy in the quiet. Watson yawned, ready to call it a night, when a sharp knock rattled the door. Holmes's head snapped up, his eyes gleaming like a cat's in the dark. At last, he murmured, a faint smile curling his lips. A visitor at this hour can only mean trouble. Watson set his book aside, his heart picking up a beat. Trouble with Holmes was never ordinary. Mrs. Hudson, their landlady, shuffled to the door, her voice muffled as she spoke to someone outside. Moments later, she appeared, her face pale and her shawl clutched tight. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice trembling. "There's a gentleman here. Says it's urgent. He looks strange, sir, all shaken like he's seen a ghost." Holmes was already on his feet, his lean frame moving with purpose. "Show him in, Mrs. Hudson, and bring tea. Our guest may need it." The man who entered was a wiry figure, his coat damp from the fog and his hat clutched in trembling hands. He was young, no more than 30, with a thin face and wide, nervous eyes that darted around the room. His clothes were fine but rumpled, as if he'd dressed in a hurry. A faint smell of old books and dust clung to him, hinting at a life spent in quiet, scholarly places. "Mr. Holmes," the man said, his voice high and unsteady. "My name is Edward Grayson. I'm a curator at the British Museum. I've heard of your skill and I need your help. Something terrible is happening." Holmes gestured to a chair. "Sit, Mr. Grayson. Calm yourself and tell me everything." "Leave out no detail, however small." Grayson sank into the chair, his hands twisting his hat. Watson watched closely, noting the man's pale skin and the sweat beading on his brow despite the cool night. This was no ordinary fear. Something had shaken Grayson to his core. "It's the statues," Grayson began, his voice barely above a whisper. "In the museum. They speak." Watson blinked, certain he'd misheard. Holmes, however, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Speak, you say? Describe it." Grayson swallowed hard, his gaze flickering to the fire as if seeking comfort in its glow. "It started 3 nights ago. I was working late in the antiquities wing, cataloging a new shipment from Egypt. The museum was empty, or so I thought. Around midnight I heard voices, low, like a whisper, but clear. Words I couldn't understand, in a language I didn't know. I thought it was a trick, maybe someone hiding playing a prank, but when I searched there was no one, just the statues." Holmes's fingers tapped a rhythm on the arm of his chair. "And these statues, what are they?" "They're from a dig near Thebes," Grayson said. 4 stone figures, each about 6 feet tall, carved from black basalt. They're old, Mr. Holmes, older than anything we've found before. The inscriptions call them the guardians of the silent gate. They were meant to protect a tomb, but the tomb was empty when we found them. Just these statues standing in a circle facing inward. Watson frowned, his practical mind struggling with the idea. Statues didn't speak. They were stone, lifeless. Yet Grayson's fear was real, and Holmes's interest was piqued. Did you see them speak? Holmes asked, his voice sharp. Grayson shook his head. No, but I heard them. The whispers came from their direction, I'm sure of it. And there's more. The next night I went back with a colleague, Mr. Hargrove. We waited and the whispers came again. Hargrove said he saw one of the statues move. Its head, just a little, like it was watching us. I didn't believe him at first, but then, last night I saw it too. A shadow moved across one statue's face like it was alive. And the whispers, they weren't just words. They felt angry. Holmes's eyes gleamed with a fierce light. Angry, you say? Interesting. And what do these whispers say? I couldn't make out the words, Grayson admitted. It's not English nor any language I know. But it's not just noise. It's like they're speaking to each other or to someone else. Someone not there. Watson shifted in his seat, unease creeping up his spine. He glanced at Holmes, expecting a dismissive remark, but Holmes's face was alight with curiosity. Have you told anyone else? Holmes asked. Only Hargrove, Grayson said. He's as scared as I am. The museum director, Sir Charles, thinks we're imagining things. He says it's just the wind or creaking pipes. But I know what I heard, Mr. Holmes, and I know what I saw. Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled again. And what do you fear, Mr. Grayson? What brings you here at midnight? Grayson's eyes widened and his voice dropped to a whisper. I think the statues are waking up. And if they are, I don't know what they'll do, or what they want. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Watson felt a chill, though the room was warm. Holmes, however, was already on his feet, his energy like a coiled spring. Watson, my coat. We're going to the museum. Now? Watson asked, startled. It's the middle of the night. Precisely, Holmes said, his smile sharp. The hour when statues whisper. Mr. Grayson, you'll come with us. I want to hear these voices for myself. Grayson looked torn between relief and dread, but nodded. Watson grabbed his coat, his mind racing. Statues that spoke? It was madness. Yet Holmes's excitement was infectious, and Watson knew better than to argue when his friend was on the scent of a mystery. The trio stepped into the fog, the night swallowing them as they hailed a hansom cab. The ride to the British Museum was quiet, the only sounds the clop of hooves and the distant cry of a night watchman. Grayson sat hunched, his hand still twisting his hat, while Holmes stared out the window, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. The museum loomed ahead, its grand columns ghostly in the fog. The night watchman, a burly man with a lantern, let them in after Grayson showed his credentials. The air inside was cold, heavy with the smell of stone and time. The watchman's lantern cast long shadows as they moved through the halls, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The antiquities wing was at the far end, a vast room filled with relics of forgotten worlds. The statues stood in a shadowed corner, 4 towering figures arranged in a circle. Even in the dim light, they were imposing, dark, smooth stone carved into human shapes, their faces stern and unyielding. Their eyes, though empty, seemed to watch the intruders. Holmes moved closer, his lantern raised. Remarkable, he murmured, studying the carvings. The craftsmanship is exquisite, no sign of wear despite their age. And these inscriptions. He traced a finger over the strange symbols etched into the base of one statue. Not Egyptian, not entirely. Something older, perhaps. Watson stood back, his hand resting on the revolver in his pocket. The air felt heavy, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Grayson hovered near the entrance, his eyes wide. This is where I heard them, he whispered. Right here. Holmes set the lantern down and motioned for silence. The three men stood still, the only sound their own breathing. Minutes passed, the quiet stretching taut. Watson began to think Grayson's fears were just nerves when a sound broke the silence, a low guttural murmur, like a voice speaking through stone. Watson froze, his heart pounding. The sound came again, faint but clear, a string of words in a language he didn't know. It seemed to come from the statues, though none moved. Holmes's eyes gleamed, his body tense with excitement. "Fascinating," he whispered. "Watson, your notebook. Record the rhythm of the sounds." Watson fumbled for his notebook, his hands unsteady. The whispers continued, rising and falling, sometimes sharp, sometimes soft. They weren't random. They had a pattern, like a conversation. Holmes circled the statues, his eyes scanning every inch of stone. "No visible mechanism," he muttered. "No wires, no hollows, yet the sound is unmistakable." Grayson's voice trembled. "You hear it, don't you? I'm not mad." Holmes didn't answer, his focus absolute. He knelt by one statue, his fingers brushing the base. "Watson, note the temperature. The stone is warm, warmer than the air. Curious." Watson touched the statue, startled by the faint heat under his fingers. Stone shouldn't feel like that, not in a cold museum at night. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and Watson's skin prickled. He glanced at Grayson, who looked ready to bolt. Then, without warning, the whispers stopped. The silence was sudden, heavy, like a door slamming shut. Watson's breath caught, and even Holmes paused, his head tilted as if listening for something more. But the room stayed quiet, the statues still and lifeless once again. Holmes stood, brushing dust from his hands. "Mr. Grayson, you've brought me a puzzle worth solving. Watson, we'll return tomorrow in daylight. I need to see these statues clearly, and I have some inquiries to make." Grayson nodded, relief washing over his face. "You'll help then? You'll find out what's happening?" Holmes's smile was thin but certain. "Oh, I intend to. Statues that whisper are not a common occurrence, even in London. There's a truth here, and I mean to find it." As they left the museum, the fog seemed thicker, the night darker. Watson glanced back at the looming building, a shiver running through him. He didn't believe in ghosts or curses, but something about those statues unsettled him. Holmes, however, was alight with purpose, his mind already racing ahead to the next clue. Back at Baker Street, as the fire died to embers, Watson couldn't shake the memory of those whispers. He looked at Holmes, who was already scribbling notes, his face alive with the thrill of the chase. Whatever the truth behind the whispering statues, Watson knew one thing: this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. A curious summons. The morning sun barely pierced the fog that still clung to London's streets, casting a pale, sickly light through the windows of 221B Baker Street. Sherlock Holmes sat at the breakfast table, his plate untouched, a pile of papers and a magnifying glass scattered before him. Watson, nursing a cup of tea, watched his friend with a mix of curiosity and concern. Holmes had been up half the night, scribbling notes and muttering about ancient languages and stonework. The strange case of the whispering statues had sunk its hooks deep into his mind. Watson glanced at the clock. It was just past 8, and the city was waking, the distant rumble of carts and shouts of vendors filtering through the window. He was about to suggest a plan for the day when a sharp rap at the door broke the quiet. Mrs. Hudson bustled in, holding a sealed envelope, her face pinched with unease. "Another visitor?" Watson asked, raising an eyebrow. "No, sir." "Mrs." Hudson said, handing the envelope to Holmes. "This came by messenger not 10 minutes ago. The boy who brought it said it was urgent, then ran off before I could ask more." Holmes took the envelope, his eyes narrowing as he studied it. The paper was thick, expensive, with a faint scent of wax and ink. His long fingers tore it open, revealing a single sheet of paper, the writing bold and precise. He read it quickly, his expression unreadable, then passed it to Watson. The note was short, written in black ink with a steady hand. "Mr. Holmes, your reputation precedes you. I require your presence at the British Museum at once. The matter is delicate and concerns the antiquities wing. Discretion is paramount. Come alone." Sir Charles Warrington Watson frowned, handing the note back. "Sir Charles? That's the museum director Grayson mentioned, the one who dismissed the whispers as nonsense." "Indeed," Holmes said, his voice low, a spark of interest in his eyes. "Yet now he summons me with urgency and demands I come, alone. Curious, don't you think?" Watson bristled. "Alone? I don't like it, Holmes. This could be a trap. Those statues last night, they weren't natural, and Grayson was terrified. What if Sir Charles is hiding something?" Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Your concern is noted, Watson, but I'm not so easily caught. Sir Charles's note suggests he knows more than he told Grayson. A man of his position doesn't call for me unless he's desperate or afraid." He stood, grabbing his coat. "But I won't go entirely alone. You'll follow at a distance, Watson. Keep your revolver handy." Watson nodded, relieved. He wasn't about to let Holmes walk into trouble without backup, statues or no statues. They left Baker Street, the fog thinner now but still curling around the cobblestones like ghostly fingers. Holmes strode ahead, his long legs eating up the distance while Watson trailed behind, blending into the morning crowd of clerks and shopkeepers. The British Museum stood grand and solemn, its stone facade looming over the street. Holmes approached the main entrance where a guard nodded and let him pass. Watson lingered outside, pretending to read a newspaper, his eyes scanning the area. No one seemed out of place, but his gut told him something was off. The air felt heavy, like before a storm. Inside, Holmes was led through marble halls to a private office tucked behind the main galleries. Sir Charles Warrington waited behind a heavy oak desk, his face stern but pale, with deep lines etched around his eyes. He was a tall man, nearing 60, with silver hair and a stiff posture that spoke of authority, but his hands clasped tightly on the desk betrayed a flicker of nerves. "Mr. Holmes," Sir Charles said, his voice clipped. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I trust you've kept this meeting confidential?" Holmes settled into a chair, his gaze sharp. "I am here, as requested. Now tell me why. Your note mentioned the antiquities wing, and I suspect it's no coincidence that Mr. Grayson sought me out last night with tales of whispering statues." Sir Charles's jaw tightened, and for a moment he seemed to weigh his words. "Grayson," he said at last, "is a capable curator but prone to flights of fancy. I told him his so-called whispers are nothing, creaking floors perhaps, or his imagination. But—" He hesitated, his eyes flicking to the door as if expecting someone to burst in. "I cannot ignore certain irregularities." Holmes leaned forward, his voice like a blade. "Irregularities? Speak plainly, Sir Charles." "I have little patience for vagueness," the older man sighed, rubbing his temples. "Very well. The statues Grayson mentioned, the guardians of the Silent Gate. They arrived 2 weeks ago from a dig in Egypt. Since then there have been incidents. Tools misplaced, papers rearranged, and last night one of our night watchmen swore he saw a shadow moving where no one should have been. I thought it was theft or vandalism, but nothing is missing. And then there's Grayson's nonsense about voices." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "You don't believe him, yet you called me. Why?" Sir Charles leaned back, his face grim. "Because this morning I found something. A mark on one of the statues, a fresh carving, not there yesterday. It's a symbol, one I don't recognize, but it feels wrong. I can't explain it, Mr. Holmes, but I fear these statues are more than they seem." Holmes's fingers tapped the arm of his chair, a sign his mind was racing. "Show me." Sir Charles led him through the museum, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Watson, who had slipped inside by a side door, followed at a distance, his heart pounding. He kept to the shadows, his hand near his revolver, ready for anything. The antiquities wing was as eerie in daylight as it had been at night. The 4 statues stood in their circle, their blank eyes staring inward. Sir Charles pointed to one, where a small, jagged symbol had been carved into the base, a twisting shape like a coiled snake. Holmes knelt, his magnifying glass in hand, studying the mark with intense focus. "Fresh, as you said," Holmes murmured. "The stone is unweathered, the cut precise. This was done with a fine tool, not a clumsy hand. And the symbol—" He traced it with a finger, his brow furrowing. "It's not Egyptian nor any common script. Perhaps Proto-Sumerian or something older still." Sir Charles paled. "Older? What do you mean?" Holmes stood, brushing dust from his knees. "I mean, Sir Charles, that these statues may be more than relics. They may be a message or a warning. Tell me about the dig. Who found them? Who brought them here?" Sir Charles hesitated, then spoke. "The dig was led by Professor Alistair Thorne, an expert in ancient Near Eastern cultures. He's eccentric but brilliant. He found the statues in a buried chamber untouched for centuries. He insisted we bring them to London, said they were a discovery unlike any other." "Where is Thorne now?" Holmes asked. "He returned to Egypt last week," Sir Charles said. "He's due back tomorrow. I've sent word for him to meet us." Holmes nodded, his mind already turning. "Good. I'll need to speak with him. In the meantime, no one touches these statues. Post a guard, but keep them at a distance and tell no one else, not even Grayson." Sir Charles frowned. "You think Grayson's involved?" "I think nothing yet," Holmes said, his tone sharp. "But I trust no one until I have facts. Now I have work to do. I'll return tomorrow." As Holmes left the museum, Watson caught up with him outside, his face flushed with questions. "What did you find, Holmes? Was Sir Charles telling the truth?" Holmes's eyes were distant, his mind elsewhere. "He's telling part of the truth, Watson, but he's hiding something. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. That symbol on the statue is no accident. Someone wants it seen, and I intend to find out why." They walked back to Baker Street, the fog swirling around them. Watson felt the weight of the mystery growing, like a shadow stretching across their path. Holmes, however, was alive with purpose, his every step a challenge to the unknown. Whatever the statues were hiding, Watson knew his friend would unravel it or die trying. Chapter 3. The Enigmatic Client. The afternoon sun did little to warm the chill that lingered in the air of 221B Baker Street. Sherlock Holmes sat by the window, his violin resting on his knee, though he hadn't played a note. His eyes were fixed on the street below, watching the comings and goings of London's busy crowds. Watson, seated at the table with a half-finished letter to an old army friend, kept stealing glances at Holmes. The detective's silence was never a good sign. It meant his mind was chewing on something, and the case of the whispering statues was proving to be a particularly tough bone. The morning's visit to the museum had left Watson uneasy. That strange symbol on the statue, like a coiled snake, stuck in his mind. Holmes had said little on their walk back, only muttering about ancient scripts and the need to speak with Professor Thorne. Watson knew better than to press him when he was like this, but the waiting was wearing on his nerves. A sharp knock at the door snapped Watson out of his thoughts. Mrs. Hudson appeared, her face a mix of curiosity and caution. "Mr. Holmes, there's a lady here to see you. She wouldn't give her name, but she says it's about the museum. She looks, well, not like our usual visitors." Holmes set the violin aside, his eyes gleaming. "A lady, you say? Interesting. Show her in, Mrs. Hudson." The woman who entered was striking, though not in the usual way. She was tall, dressed in a dark green cloak that hid most of her figure, with a veil covering her face. Her movements were graceful but tense, like a deer ready to bolt. She carried a small leather satchel, clutched tightly in gloved hands. The faint scent of jasmine followed her, cutting through the smoky air of the room. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice low and steady, with a hint of an accent Watson couldn't place. "I've heard you're the man to see when mysteries grow dark. I need your help." Holmes gestured to a chair. "Sit, madam. Remove your veil, if you please. I prefer to see the face of those who seek my aid." The woman hesitated, then lifted the veil, revealing a face both beautiful and sharp. Her eyes were a deep hazel, bright with intelligence but shadowed with worry. Her dark hair was pinned tightly and her skin was pale, as if she hadn't seen much sun. Watson guessed she was in her 30s, though something in her gaze made her seem older. "I am Miss Elena Carver," she said, her voice firm now. "I work with Professor Alistair Thorne, the man who found the Guardians of the Silent Gate. I was at the dig in Egypt and I know something about those statues, something dangerous." Holmes leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Go on, Miss Carver. What do you know and why come to me now?" She glanced at Watson, then back at Holmes, as if weighing how much to trust them. "I arrived in London yesterday, after Professor Thorne sent for me. He's been strange since the dig, obsessed with the statues, secretive. He told me not to speak of them, but last night, I overheard him talking to someone at his lodgings. He mentioned the statues and a name. Khepri. He said, Khepri must not wake. I don't know what it means, but it scared me." Watson frowned, jotting the name in his notebook. Khepri sounded foreign, maybe Egyptian, but he wasn't sure. Holmes's eyes narrowed, his mind clearly racing. "Khepri," he repeated softly. "A name tied to the statues, perhaps. What else did you hear?" Miss Carver's hands tightened on her satchel. "Not much. The other man left quickly and Thorne locked himself in his study. But I found this." She opened the satchel and pulled out a small worn journal, its pages yellowed and edges frayed. It was in the dig records, hidden in Thorne's tent. It's not his writing, but it mentions the statues and a ritual, something about a silent gate that must stay closed. Holmes took the journal, flipping through it with quick, precise movements. The pages were filled with tight, slanted handwriting and rough sketches of the statues, along with symbols like the one they'd seen at the museum. "This is old," Holmes said, his voice low. "Older than the dig. Where did Thorne get it?" "I don't know," Miss Carver said. "He never mentioned it. But he's changed, Mr. Holmes. He's not the man I worked with in Egypt. He's afraid, and I think he's hiding something that could hurt people." Watson shifted in, his seat, his unease growing. "Hurt people? Do you think these statues are dangerous?" Miss Carver's eyes met his, and for a moment her composure slipped. "I don't know what they are, Dr. Watson, but at the dig one of the workers disappeared. We thought he ran off, but his tools were found near the statues and there was blood on the sand. No one spoke of it after, but I saw the fear in Thorne's eyes." Holmes closed the journal, his expression unreadable. "Why come to me, Miss Carver? Why not go to the police or Sir Charles at the museum?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "The police won't believe me. Sir Charles thinks the statues are just stone, and he trusts Thorne, but I don't. And you, Mr. Holmes, have a reputation for seeing what others miss." Holmes leaned back, studying her. "You're holding something back, Miss Carver. What is it?" She hesitated, then reached into her satchel again, pulling out a small object wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it, carefully, revealing a fragment of black stone, no bigger than a coin, carved with the same coiled snake symbol they'd seen on the statue. "I found this in Thorne's tent with the journal. It was hidden in a box locked tight. I took it before he could notice." Holmes took the fragment, turning it over in his fingers. Basalt, like the statues, and the symbol, identical. To the one at the museum, this is no coincidence. He fixed Miss Carver with a piercing stare. "You've taken a risk coming here. Why?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because last night, after I took the journal and the stone, someone followed me. I heard footsteps in the fog, but when I turned, no one was there. I think they know I have it." Watson's hand instinctively went to his pocket, where his revolver sat. The room felt colder, the weight of the mystery pressing down. Holmes, however, was calm, his eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. "Miss Carver," he said, "you've done well to bring this to me. Leave the journal and the stone. I'll see you safely to your lodgings, and you'll say nothing of this to anyone, not even Professor Thorne." She nodded, relief mixing with fear in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. But please be careful. There's something dark about those statues. I can feel it." Holmes stood, slipping the journal and stone into his pocket. "Watson, We'll escort Miss Carver home, then pay a visit to Professor Thorne's lodgings. I suspect he'll have much to tell us when he returns tomorrow." As they stepped into the foggy street, Watson kept close to Miss Carver, his eyes scanning the shadows. The city felt alive with secrets, the statue's whispers echoing in his mind. Holmes walked ahead, his stride purposeful, already piecing together the puzzle. Whatever lay behind the silent gate, Watson knew they were stepping closer to its heart and its danger. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Museum. The fog had thickened by the time Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson returned to the British Museum, the evening air heavy with damp and the faint smell of coal smoke. Miss Elena Carver had been safely escorted to her lodgings, a modest boarding house in Bloomsbury, though her nervous glances over her shoulder told Watson she still felt watched. Holmes, clutching the journal and stone fragment in his coat pocket, was silent during the cab ride, his mind clearly turning over the new pieces of the puzzle. Watson's thoughts were less focused. The memory of Miss Carver's story, the missing worker, the blood on the sand, the name Kipri, gnawed at him. He was a man of science, not given to superstition, but the statue's whispers and that strange, coiled symbol stirred an unease he couldn't shake. As the cab rattled to a stop outside the museum, he gripped his revolver, hoping it would be enough if trouble came. The museum's grand doors were locked, but Holmes had a way with locks, his nimble fingers making quick work of the side entrance used by the staff. The night watchman, the same burly man from the previous night, was nowhere in sight. The silence inside was heavy, broken only by the faint creak of their footsteps on the marble floor. Holmes led the way to the antiquities wing, his lantern casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The statues stood as they had before, 4 silent giants in their circle, their stone faces stern and unyielding. Watson felt a chill, though the air was no colder than before. "Holmes," he whispered, "do you think Miss Carver's telling the truth about Thorne and that journal?" Holmes didn't answer at once, his eyes fixed on the statues. He set the lantern down and pulled out the journal, flipping to a page with a sketch of the coiled snake symbol. "Her story holds for now, Watson," he said softly. "The journal is old, the stone fragment matches the statues, and her fear is genuine. But there's more here than she knows, or is telling." He stepped closer to the statues, his gaze sweeping over them. "Notice the positioning, Watson. They face inward, as if guarding something at the center. Yet there's nothing there, but empty floor. Curious." He knelt by the statue with the carved symbol, his fingers tracing the mark. This was no idle vandalism. The cut is deliberate, precise. Someone meant it to be seen. Watson glanced around, his nerves taut. The shadows seemed to shift, though he told himself it was just the lantern's flicker. "What are we looking for, Holmes? More symbols? Or are you expecting those whispers again?" Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Both, perhaps. But first I want to test a theory." He pulled the stone fragment from his pocket and held it near the statue's base, aligning it with the carved symbol. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low hum filled the air. Not the whispers from before, but a deep resonant vibration like a tuning fork struck against stone. Watson's heart jumped. "Holmes, what's that?" Holmes's eyes gleamed with excitement. "A reaction, Watson. The fragment and the statue are connected. This hum, it's no natural sound. It suggests a mechanism, or something older, stranger." He pressed the fragment closer, and the hum grew louder, the air seeming to throb with it. Then, a shadow moved. Not a flicker of light, but a distinct shape, darting across the wall behind the statues. Watson spun, his revolver drawn, but saw nothing. "Holmes, did you see that?" Holmes was already moving, his lantern raised, searching the corners of the room. "I saw it, Watson. Stay sharp." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a hunter sensing prey. The hum stopped as Holmes pulled the fragment away, and the room fell silent again. But the silence felt wrong, heavy like the moment before a storm breaks. Watson's eyes darted to the statues, half expecting them to move, but they stood still, their blank eyes mocking his fear. Holmes circled the statues, his movements quick and precise. "There's something here, Watson. A hidden space, perhaps. Or a trigger. The journal mentions a silent gate. If these statues are guardians, they're guarding something." He tapped the floor with his foot, listening for a hollow sound, but the marble was solid. Watson kept his revolver ready, his gaze scanning the shadows. Holmes were not alone. That shadow, it wasn't a trick of the light. "Someone's here." Holmes nodded, his eyes never leaving the statues. "Agreed. And they're watching us. But they're cautious, or we'd have seen them by now." He slipped the journal and fragment back into his pocket, then froze. A faint scrape like a boot on stone came from the far end of the wing. Watson turned, his heart pounding. "There!" he hissed, pointing to a doorway leading to another gallery. A figure stood there, cloaked in darkness, too far to make out details. Before Watson could call out, the figure vanished, the sound of hurried footsteps fading into the distance. Holmes was already running, his lantern swinging wildly. "After them, Watson!" he shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. Watson followed, his boots pounding on the marble as they chased the fleeting shadow through the museum's maze of halls. The galleries were a blur of relics and statues, their shapes looming like silent watchers in the dim light. The chase ended at a locked door leading to the museum's basement. Holmes knelt, examining the lock. "Picked recently," he said, his fingers brushing the faint scratches around the keyhole. "Our shadow is no amateur, but they're gone for now." Watson caught his breath, his revolver still in hand. "Who was that, Holmes? A thief? Or someone tied to the statues?" Holmes stood, his face thoughtful. "Not a thief, Watson. Nothing's been taken, and the statues are too heavy to steal. No, this is someone with a purpose. Someone who knows more than we do." He glanced back toward the antiquities wing. "We need to find that night watchman. He should have seen something." They retraced their steps, but the watchman was still missing. The antiquities wing was as they'd left it, the statues silent and unmoving. Holmes studied them again, his eyes lingering on the carved symbol. "This mark is a message," he said. "A warning or an invitation. And our shadow knows what it means." Watson's unease grew. "Holmes, this is getting dangerous. Miss Carver's being followed. Someone's watching us, and those statues, they're not right. What if Miss Carver's right about Thorne? What if he's involved?" Holmes's smile was grim. "Then we'll ask him ourselves tomorrow. For now, we return to Baker Street. I need to study this journal, and we need rest. Our shadow won't strike again tonight. They've been seen." As they left the museum, the fog swallowed them once. More the city's lights dim and distant. Watson's mind raced with questions, but Holmes was quiet, his thoughts locked away. The statues, the symbol, the shadow. They were pieces of a puzzle. And Watson knew Holmes wouldn't rest until he'd fitted them together. But as they climbed into a cab, Watson couldn't shake the feeling that the silent gate, whatever it was starting to open. Chapter 5. The first statue speaks. The clock at 221B Baker Street ticked past midnight, its steady rhythm a faint counterpoint to the restless energy in the room. Sherlock Holmes sat cross-legged on the floor, the journal from Miss Carver spread, open before him, its pages lit by the flickering glow of a single lamp. The stone fragment with its coiled snake symbol rested on the table, catching the light like a dark, unblinking eye. Dr. Watson, too, wound up to sleep, paced near the window, his thoughts tangled with the events at the museum. The hum, the shadow, the chase that led nowhere. Holmes hadn't spoken for hours, his focus absolute as he pored over the journal's cramped handwriting and strange sketches. Watson had tried to read over his shoulder, but the text was a jumble of unfamiliar words and symbols, like a code from a forgotten world. "Holmes," Watson said at last, his voice low to avoid waking Mrs. Hudson. "Have you found anything? That journal's giving me a headache just looking at it. Holmes didn't look up, but his lips twitched into a faint smile. Patience, Watson. This journal is a treasure, though its writer was no scholar. The text is a mix of Coptic and something older, perhaps Akkadian. It speaks of the guardians of the silent gate, as Miss Carver said, and a ritual to keep the gate closed. But it's incomplete, as if the writer feared to say too much. Watson stopped pacing, his brow furrowed. A ritual? You mean some kind of ceremony? Holmes, this sounds like superstition, not science. Holmes's eyes flicked up, sharp and bright. Superstition is merely science we don't yet understand, Watson. The hum we heard tonight suggests a physical phenomenon, not a ghost story. The statues are more than stone, I'm certain of it. He closed the journal and stood, stretching his long frame. We need to return to the museum. Now. Now? Watson protested, glancing at the clock. It's nearly 1 in the morning. The museum's locked tight and we barely escaped trouble last time. Exactly, Holmes said, grabbing his coat. The hour when shadows move and statues hum. If we're to hear them speak again, it's now or never. Bring your revolver, Watson. Our shadow may still be lurking. Watson sighed but followed, his loyalty stronger than his doubts. The fog had thinned, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under the gas lamps. The cab ride to the museum was silent. Holmes lost in thought, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on his knee. Watson kept his eyes on the passing shadows, half expecting to see their mysterious pursuer from earlier. The museum was a dark, looming shape against the night sky. Holmes picked the side door's lock with practiced ease, and they slipped inside, the air cold and heavy with the smell of dust and stone. The antiquities wing felt different at this hour, the silence deeper, the shadows sharper. The 4 statues stood in their circle, their blank eyes seeming to follow the intruders. Holmes set his lantern down, its light casting eerie shapes across the statues' faces. He pulled the stone fragment from his pocket and approached the statue with the carved symbol. Let's try again, he murmured, holding the fragment close to the mark. The hum returned, low at first, then growing stronger, vibrating through the floor like a distant heartbeat. Watson gripped his revolver, his pulse quickening. Holmes, it's happening again. Be careful. Holmes didn't answer, his focus locked on the statue. The hum shifted, becoming a murmur. Words, faint but clear in a language Watson couldn't grasp. They seemed to come from the statue itself, though its stone lips never moved. The sound was low, urgent, like a warning whispered in a dream. Watson, your notebook, Holmes said sharply. Write down the rhythm, the cadence. It's not random, it's a pattern. Watson fumbled for his notebook, his hands unsteady as he tried to capture the strange sounds. The words rose and fell, sometimes sharp, sometimes soft, like a conversation between unseen speakers. He scribbled what he could, though the language was beyond him. Holmes, this is madness, he whispered. How can stone speak? Holmes's eyes gleamed with excitement. Not stone, Watson, something within it. A resonance, perhaps, or a mechanism we don't yet understand. Listen. He pressed the fragment closer, and the murmurs grew louder, more distinct. One word stood out, repeated like a chant. Kipri. Watson's blood ran cold. That's the name Miss Carver heard. What does it mean? Holmes didn't answer, his attention fixed on the statue. The hum intensified, and then, with a suddenness, that made Watson jump. The statue's head shifted. It was slight, barely a fraction, but unmistakable. The stone seemed to turn, its blank eyes locking onto Holmes. Holmes, Watson hissed, stepping back, his revolver raised. It moved. Holmes held his ground, his face alight with fascination. Fascinating, he murmured. A mechanical trick or something else entirely? He reached out, his fingers brushing the statue's surface, and the murmurs stopped, the hum fading to silence. The statue was still again, but the air felt charged like the aftermath of a lightning strike. Watson's heart pounded. Holmes, we need to leave. This isn't safe. That thing, it looked at you. Holmes stepped back, slipping the fragment into his pocket. It's not alive, Watson, but it's not inert either. There's a purpose here, a design. We need to find Professor Thorne. He knows more than he's told anyone. As they turned to leave, a sharp clatter echoed from the far end of the wing, a crate tipping over, its contents spilling across the floor. Holmes spun, his lantern raised, but the shadows were empty. "Our shadow returns," he said, his voice low. "They're watching, but they're not ready to show themselves." Watson's grip tightened on his revolver. "We can't keep chasing ghosts, Holmes. We need answers. And we'll have them," Holmes said, his tone firm. "Tomorrow we meet Thorne. For now we take what we've learned and prepare." He glanced at the statues one last time, their silent forms looming in the dark. "The first statue has spoken, Watson. The others will follow." They left the museum, the night closing around them like a shroud. Watson's mind raced with the impossible. Stone that moved, voices from nowhere, a name that carried a weight he couldn't understand. Holmes, however, was calm, his steps brisk, his mind already racing toward the next clue. As they climbed into a cab, Watson knew one thing for certain. The silent gate was no longer just a name. It was a mystery that could swallow them whole. Chapter 6. Clues Carved in Stone. The morning light crept through the curtains of 221B Baker Street, pale and gray, doing little to lift the heavy mood in the room. Sherlock Holmes sat at his cluttered desk, the journal from Miss Carver open before him, its pages marked with notes in his precise handwriting. The stone fragment with the coiled snake symbol sat nearby, glinting faintly under the lamp. Dr. Watson, nursing a second cup of tea, watched his friend with growing concern. The events of the previous night, the statue's eerie movement, the whispered name Khepri, the fleeting shadow, had left him restless, his sleep broken by uneasy dreams. Holmes, however, was in his element. His eyes, sharp and bright, darted across the journal's sketches and cryptic text. "This is no ordinary relic, Watson," he said, not looking up. "The statues are a puzzle, and this journal is the key. The writer mentions a gate that must remain closed in Khepri, a name tied to Egyptian myth, a god of creation and rebirth. But why would stone speak his name?" Watson set his cup down, his brow furrowed. "Holmes, you saw that statue move. It wasn't a trick of the light. And that hum, those whispers, it's not natural. Are we dealing with something supernatural?" Holmes's lips twitched into a rare smile. "Supernatural? No, Watson. Extraordinary, perhaps, but rooted in the physical world. The hum suggests a mechanism, vibration, resonance, perhaps triggered by the stone fragment. The movement could be a clever design, or something we don't yet grasp. But it's no ghost." Watson wasn't convinced, but he trusted Holmes's logic. "What about the shadow we chased? Someone's watching us, Holmes. And Miss Carver, she's scared for her life." Holmes nodded, closing the journal. "Which is why we must speak to Professor Thorne today. He found the statues and he knows more than he shared. But first we return to the museum. I need to examine those statues in daylight, and I suspect our shadow left something behind." Watson sighed, grabbing his coat and revolver. "Back to those creepy statues. I hope you're right about this, Holmes." The British Museum was quieter than usual, its halls half empty as visitors avoided the damp, chilly morning. The antiquities wing felt colder, the air thick with the scent of stone and time. The four statues stood in their silent circle, their blank eyes seeming to watch Holmes and Watson as they approached. Holmes carried a small satchel of tools, magnifying glass, calipers, a notebook, his face set with purpose. He began with the statue that had moved, kneeling to study the coiled snake symbol at its base. "The carving is fresh, Watson," he said, his magnifying glass hovering over the mark. "No dust in the grooves, no weathering. It was made within days, perhaps hours of our first visit. But look here." He pointed to faint scratches around the symbol, barely visible. "These are older, as if someone tested their tools before making the final cut." Watson leaned closer, squinting. "So someone's been tampering with the statue? But why? To scare Grayson? Or us?" Holmes didn't answer, his attention shifting to the statue's surface. He ran his fingers along its smooth black basalt, pausing at a seam so fine it was nearly invisible. "This is no ordinary stonework," he murmured. "The joints are too precise, almost machined. And the warmth we felt last night, it's still here, faint but present." Watson touched the statue, startled by the subtle heat under his palm. "Stone shouldn't feel like that, Holmes. It's unnatural." "Unusual, not unnatural," Holmes corrected, his eyes narrowing. He moved to the next statue, then the next, checking each for similar seams or marks. On the third statue, he found something, a second symbol, smaller than the first, carved near the base. It was different, a jagged shape like a broken star, its edges rougher as if carved in haste. "Another mark," Holmes said, sketching it quickly in his notebook. "Different from the snake, but deliberate. These are not random vandalism, Watson. They're part of a sequence, a message." Watson's unease grew. "A message? To who? And what does it say?" Holmes stood, his gaze sweeping the circle of statues. "That's what we must find out. The journal mentions a ritual, and these symbols may be part of it. But we need more. Thorne's knowledge or the shadow's purpose." He stepped back, studying the statue's inward-facing arrangement. "They're guarding something, Watson. A space, a secret, or perhaps a trigger." As Holmes spoke, a faint noise caught Watson's ear, a soft shuffle like cloth brushing stone, coming from the next gallery. He turned, his hand on his revolver. "Holmes, did you hear that?" Holmes nodded, his body tensing. "Our shadow is bold to return so soon." He motioned for Watson to stay low and moved silently toward the sound, his lantern dimmed to avoid detection. Watson followed, his heart pounding, the museum's shadows seeming to pulse with hidden life. They reached the doorway to the next gallery, a smaller room filled with Egyptian artifacts, sarcophagi, pottery, and carved reliefs. The shuffle came again, closer now from behind a tall display case. Holmes signaled for Watson to circle around, his own steps silent as he approached from the other side. Watson's grip tightened on his revolver as he peered around the case. A figure crouched there, cloaked in dark clothing, their face hidden by a scarf. They were examining a small object, a shard of pottery, its surface etched with symbols like those on the statues. Before Watson could call out, the figure sensed him, bolting upright and darting toward a side exit. "Holmes!" Watson shouted, giving chase. Holmes was already moving, his long legs closing the distance. The figure was fast, weaving through the galleries with ease, but Holmes was relentless, his lantern swinging as he pursued. Watson followed, his breath short, cursing the museum's maze-like layout. The chase ended at a locked storeroom door, the figure slipping inside just as Holmes reached it. He tested the handle, locked tight with fresh scratches around the keyhole. "They're prepared," Holmes said, his voice low, "but they've left us a gift." He pointed to the floor where a single piece of pottery lay, dropped in the figure's haste. It bore the same broken star symbol as the statue. Watson picked it up, his hands unsteady. "Another clue, Holmes? Or a trap?" Holmes took the shard, turning it over. "A clue, Watson. Our shadow is careless under pressure. This symbol matches the one on the statue, and the pottery is old, perhaps from the same dig as the Guardians." He slipped the shard into his satchel. "We'll analyze it later. For now, we prepare for Thorne's return. He's the key to this, I'm sure of it." As they left the museum, the morning fog was lifting, but Watson felt no lighter. The statues, the symbols, the shadow, they were closing in, and the name Khepri echoed in his mind like a warning. Holmes, however, was alive with purpose, his eyes burning with the thrill of the hunt. Whatever secrets the statues held, Watson knew they were one step closer to unraveling them, and one step closer to danger. Chapter 7. Watson's Midnight Vigil. The night was thick with silence at 221B Baker Street, the kind of quiet that presses on the ears and makes every creak sound like a warning. Dr. Watson sat by the fire, his revolver on the table beside him, the journal from Miss Carver open in his lap. Sherlock Holmes had gone out hours ago, muttering about a lead at the docks where the statues had arrived from Egypt. He'd left Watson with strict instructions: guard the journal and the stone fragment, and stay awake until he returned. "Our shadow is bold, Watson," Holmes had said, his eyes sharp. "They may come for what we have." Watson glanced at the clock, midnight. The fire was low, casting long shadows across the room, and the fog outside muffled the usual sounds of London. He was tired, his eyes heavy, but the memory of the statue's whispers and that eerie movement kept him alert. The journal's strange symbols and the name Khepri swirled in his mind, mixing with the broken star symbol on the pottery shard they'd found. It was all connected, he was sure. But how? He shifted in his chair, his hand resting near the revolver. Holmes had been gone too long, and Watson's nerves were fraying. The museum chases, the shadowy figure, Miss Carver's fear. It was building to something, and he didn't like being left behind to wait. He flipped through the journal, hoping for a clue, but the text was as baffling as ever. The sketches of the statues stared back at him, their blank eyes unnervingly lifelike. A soft thud outside the window made Watson freeze. It was faint, like a pebble hitting glass, but in the quiet, it was sharp as a gunshot. He set the journal down and grabbed his revolver, moving to the window with slow, careful steps. The street below was cloaked in fog, the gas lamps barely visible. Nothing moved, but Watson's gut told him he wasn't alone. Another sound, a scrape, this time from the stairs. Watson's heart pounded. Mrs. Hudson was asleep, and Holmes had his own key. No one else should be here. He crept to the door, his revolver ready, and listened. The scrape came again, closer, followed by a faint creak as if someone was trying to move silently but failing. Watson eased the door open, peering into the dark hallway. The shadows were thick, but he caught a flicker of movement near the top of the stairs. A figure cloaked and hooded, frozen mid-step. "Who's there?" Watson called, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. "Show yourself." The figure bolted, their footsteps thudding down the stairs. Watson gave chase, his revolver raised, his boots loud on the wooden steps. The figure was fast, reaching the front door and yanking it open before Watson could close the distance. He burst onto the street, the fog swallowing the figure's shape, but he heard their steps fading toward the alley. "Stop!" Watson shouted, running after them. The fog was a gray wall, muffling sound and blurring shapes. He followed the footsteps, his breath short until they stopped abruptly. He slowed, revolver ready, scanning the alley's shadows. A glint caught his eye, a small object on the ground, half hidden by a crate. He knelt, keeping his senses sharp, and picked it up. It was a metal tool, thin and sharp, like a chisel, its tip stained with black dust. Watson's mind raced. The odd tool looked like something used to carve stone like the statues. Had their shadow come to steal the journal or fragment, or to leave another mark? He tucked the tool into his pocket, his eyes scanning the fog, but the figure was gone. Back at Baker Street, Watson locked the door and checked the journal and fragment, both still safe. His heart was still racing, the chase replaying in his mind. The figure had been in their home, steps from their door. This was no random thief. They knew what Holmes and Watson had, and they wanted it. When Holmes returned an hour later, his coat damp and his face grim, Watson recounted the incident, showing him the chisel. Holmes's eyes lit up as he examined it. "Basalt dust," he said, sniffing the tip. "The same stone as the statues. Our shadow is no mere spy, Watson. They're working on the statues, carving those symbols for a purpose." "What did you find at the docks?" Watson asked, still shaken. Holmes paced, his energy barely contained. "The ship that brought the statues docked 10 days ago. The crew was uneasy, said the crates felt wrong, too heavy for their size, and they heard strange noises at night. One sailor swore he saw a crate move, though his mates laughed it off. The shipment was rushed through customs, signed off by Professor Thorne himself." Watson frowned. "Thorne again. He's at the center of this, Holmes. When do we see him?" Tomorrow morning, Holmes said, glancing at the journal. He's due back at the museum, but this chisel, Watson, it's a clue. The symbols are being added deliberately, perhaps to activate something in the statues. The journal mentions a ritual, and I suspect these marks are part of it. Watson's unease deepened. Activate? You mean like making them move again? Or speak? Holmes's smile was thin. Or something worse. The name Khepri is no coincidence. In Egyptian myth, Khepri is a god of rebirth, tied to the rising sun. But the journal hints at a darker role, a guardian of a gate that must not open. We need Thorne's knowledge, and we need to know who our shadow is. Watson nodded, though his mind was heavy. I don't like this, Holmes. That figure was here, in our home. They're not afraid of us. Then we'll make them. Afraid, Holmes said, his voice sharp. Get some rest, Watson. Tomorrow we confront Thorne, and I suspect our shadow won't be far behind. As Watson settled into his chair, revolver still close, he couldn't shake the image of the cloaked figure in the fog. The statues, the symbols, the whispers, they were closing in, and he felt the weight of something ancient and dangerous stirring. Holmes, however, was already back at the journal, his mind a blade cutting through the mystery. Whatever lay beyond the silent gate, Watson knew they were running out of time to stop it. Chapter 8. The Curator's Secret. The morning air was crisp, the fog finally giving way to a pale London sun as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson made their way to the British Museum. Watson's nerves were still raw from the midnight intruder, the chisel in his pocket a heavy reminder of how close danger had come. Holmes, however, was alert, his eyes bright with anticipation. Today they would meet Professor Alastair Thorne, the man who had unearthed the guardians of the silent gate, and Holmes was certain he held the key to the mystery. The museum's halls buzzed with early visitors, but the antiquities wing was cordoned off, a guard posted at the entrance. Holmes flashed a letter from Sir Charles Warrington, and the guard stepped aside, though his eyes lingered warily on the statues in the distance. Watson felt their presence too, the 4 stone giants looming in their silent circle, their blank gazes unsettling even in daylight. Sir Charles met them near the statues, his face drawn and tired, as if he hadn't slept. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, he said, his voice low. Professor Thorne arrived this morning. He's in my office, but I warn you, he's not himself. He's been difficult since his return. Holmes's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened. Difficult how? Sir Charles hesitated, glancing toward the statues. Agitated, secretive. He's refused to discuss the statues beyond saying they're a great discovery. And he's been asking about Grayson, where he's been, what he said. I don't trust his mood. Watson frowned, remembering Grayson's fear. Is Grayson here today? No, Sir Charles said. He called in sick, said he needed rest. I can't blame him, with all this talk of whispers. Holmes nodded, his mind clearly turning. Take us to Thorne, and ensure we're not disturbed. Sir Charles led them to his office, a cluttered room filled with books and artifacts. Professor Alastair Thorne stood by a window, his back to them, staring out at the courtyard. He was a wiry man nearing 50, with thinning hair and a face etched with lines of strain. His hands were clasped tightly behind him, and when he turned, his eyes were sharp but guarded, like a man expecting an attack. Mr. Holmes, Thorne said, his voice clipped with a faint Scottish burr. I've heard of you. Sir Charles says, you're poking into my work. What do you want? Holmes settled into a chair, his posture relaxed but his gaze piercing. The truth, Professor, about the guardians of the silent gate. You found them in Egypt, and now they're here, whispering and moving. Symbols are appearing on them, and someone is watching us. Someone who knows more than they should. What are you hiding? Thorne's face paled, but he forced a laugh. Whispering statues, moving. You've been listening to Grayson's nonsense. They're stone, Mr. Holmes, nothing more. Remarkable relics, yes, but lifeless. Watson bristled at the dismissal, his hand brushing the chisel in his pocket. We've heard them, Professor. And we've seen one move. There's a hum, a mechanism, and symbols carved fresh. Don't tell us it's nonsense. Thorne's eyes flicked to Watson, then back to Holmes, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "You're mistaken. The desert plays tricks, and so does this old museum. Creaking floors echoes, that's all." Holmes leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "Then explain this." He pulled the journal from his coat and set it on the desk, open to a page with the coiled snake symbol. "Found at your dig, hidden in your tent. It speaks of a ritual and a gate that must stay closed. And this?" He placed the stone fragment beside it, its matching symbol glinting. "Taken from your belongings. Care to tell us why you kept these secret?" Thorne's composure cracked, his hands trembling as he stared at the journal. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, his voice rising. "That's mine. Private research." "Private enough to hide from your colleagues?" Holmes said. "Miss Carver brought it to us. She's afraid, Professor. She says you've changed, that you're obsessed with the statues. And she heard you mention Khepri, a name the statues themselves whispered last night." Thorne sank into a chair, his face ashen. For a moment he said nothing, his eyes fixed on the journal. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Khepri, you don't know what you're meddling with, Holmes. Those statues, they're not just relics, they're protectors. The silent gate isn't a myth, it's real, and it's dangerous." Watson's heart skipped a beat. "Dangerous how? What's the gate, and why are the statues speaking?" Thorne rubbed his temples, his voice strained. "I found them in a buried chamber near Thebes, sealed for thousands of years. The inscriptions called them guardians, meant to keep the gate closed. I thought it was folklore, a story to scare grave robbers. But when we opened the chamber, things changed. One of my workers vanished. There was blood, no body. And I started hearing voices." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "You heard the whispers, too. Why didn't you report this?" Thorne's laugh was bitter. "Report what? That I was hearing voices from stone? I'd be laughed out of the academic world. But I studied the inscriptions, found that journal in the chamber. It's not mine. It's ancient, written by someone who knew the statue's purpose. They guard a gate to something else, a place or a power tied to Khepri. If it opens, I don't know what happens. But the journal says it mustn't." Watson's unease grew. "And the symbols? The snake? The broken star?" Thorne hesitated, his eyes darting to the door. "I don't know about the star, the snake. It's a warning, a mark to keep the ritual dormant. Someone's carving them now, here in London. I thought it was vandals, but if you found that, chisel." He trailed off, fear creeping into his voice. Holmes leaned closer. "Who else knows about this? Who's following us, carving these symbols?" Thorne shook his head. "I don't know. I swear it. I've been trying to stop it, to keep the statues quiet, but someone else is out there, someone who wants the gate opened." A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. Sir Charles poked his head in, his face pale. "Mr. Holmes, you need to see this." In the antiquities wing, another symbols appeared just now. Holmes was on his feet, his satchel in hand. "Stay here, Professor Watson, with me." They hurried to the antiquities wing, where a small crowd of staff had gathered, whispering nervously. A third statue now bore a symbol, a crescent moon carved deep into its base, the stone dust still fresh. Holmes knelt, his magnifying glass out, his face grim. "Another mark, Watson. Different again, but part of the same sequence. Our shadow is moving faster." Watson's hand rested on his revolver, his eyes scanning the room. "They were here, Holmes, while we were with Thorne. They're bold." Holmes stood, his expression hard. "Bold, but not invisible. They're leaving clues, and we'll find them. Thorne's hiding something still. I saw it in his eyes. We'll watch him, and we'll watch the statues. The next move is ours." As they left the wing, Watson felt the weight of the mystery pressing harder. Thorne's confession, the new symbol, the shadow's daring. It was all closing in. Holmes's mind was racing, but Watson couldn't shake the fear that they were running out of time to keep the silent gate closed. Chapter 9. Echoes of the past. The afternoon light filtered weakly through the grimy windows of 221B Baker Street, casting long shadows across the cluttered room. Sherlock Holmes stood at his desk, The journal from Miss Carver opened before him, its pages now marked with his own notes and diagrams. The stone fragment, the chisel, and the pottery shard with the broken star symbol were arranged nearby, each a piece of the growing puzzle. Dr. Watson sat by the fire, his notebook open, scribbling, details from their meeting with Professor Thorne. The curator's confession about the silent gate and the name Khepri lingered in Watson's mind, stirring a mix of curiosity and dread. Holmes hadn't spoken for nearly an hour, his focus absolute as he studied the journal's sketches. The coiled snake, broken star, and crescent moon symbols were drawn in his notebook, connected by lines and question marks. Watson watched him, knowing this silence meant Holmes was close to a breakthrough, or a dead end. "Holmes," Watson said, breaking the quiet, "Thorne's story about the gate, do you believe him? He seemed scared, but he's still hiding something." Holmes looked up, his eyes sharp. "Thorne's fear is real, Watson, but his truth is partial. He knows more about the statues than he's saying. The journal confirms the silent gate is no myth. It's tied to these symbols, and someone is carving them to awaken something. But what?" He tapped the stone fragment. "This basalt piece is the key. It resonates with the statues, triggering the hum and whispers. I need to know its origin." Watson frowned, setting his notebook down. "You think the fragment came from the same chamber as the statues?" Thorne said it was sealed for centuries. "Exactly," Holmes said, pacing now. "Yet the fragment was in Thorne's possession, hidden. And the symbols, each new one appears after we get closer. Our shadow is watching, Watson, and they're not just following us. They're guiding us, leaving clues to draw us in." Watson's stomach tightened. "Guiding us? To what? Opening this gate?" "Holmes, this feels like a trap." Holmes's smile was grim. "A trap or a challenge? Either way, we need more information. The journal mentions a ritual, but it's vague, deliberately. So, I suspect the writer feared what they knew. We need to trace the statue's journey from the dig to London, and we need to find Grayson. His absence today bothers me." Watson nodded, remembering Grayson's pale face and trembling hands. "He's scared out of his wits. Do you think he's run off, or worse?" Holmes's eyes darkened. "I hope he's hiding, but we'll check his lodgings tonight. First, I want to consult an expert on ancient scripts. The symbols aren't purely Egyptian, and the journal's text hints at something older. There's a man at the British Library, Dr. Elias Harrow, who specializes in pre-dynastic languages. He may know more." The British Library was a short cab ride away, its grand halls filled with the musty smell of old books. Dr. Harrow, a small, bespectacled man with a nervous twitch, met them in a quiet reading room, his desk piled with manuscripts. Holmes wasted no time, placing the journal and sketches of the symbols before him. Harrow's eyes widened as he studied the coiled snake, broken star, and crescent moon symbols. "These are extraordinary," he said, his voice hushed. "Not Egyptian, not in the usual sense. The snake resembles early Sumerian seals, but the star and moon, they're older, perhaps Proto-Elamite, from a culture we barely understand." "Where did you find these?" Holmes's tone was sharp. "On artifacts from a recent dig near Thebes. What do they mean?" Harrow adjusted his glasses, his fingers trembling slightly. "They're not just symbols, Mr. Holmes. They're part of a sequence, a kind of invocation. In ancient texts, such marks were used to bind or release forces, gods, spirits, or something else. The name Khepri, you said? In Egyptian myth, Khepri is rebirth, but older stories, pre-dynastic ones, speak of him as a guardian of a hidden realm, a gate to a place of power." Watson's heart sank. "A gate, like the silent gate?" Harrow nodded, his face pale. "Possibly. The texts are fragmented, but they warn of a gate that must stay closed, guarded by stone sentinels. If these symbols are being carved now, someone may be trying to open it." Holmes leaned forward, his voice low. "And the journal? Can you read it?" Harrow flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing. It's a mix of Coptic and an older script, perhaps Akkadian. It describes a ritual to seal the gate, using the statues as anchors. But it's incomplete, as if the writer stopped abruptly. There's a warning. The blood of the unwary wakes the gate. It's ominous, Mr. Holmes. Watson's mind flashed to the missing worker at the dig, the blood on the sand. Holmes, this is what Miss Carver mentioned. The worker who vanished, could his blood have started this? Holmes's eyes narrowed. Perhaps, but the symbols here in London suggest someone is continuing the work. We need to know who and why. He thanked Harrow and stood, his mind already racing. Watson will visit Grayson's lodgings now. If he's hiding, he may know more about our shadow. Grayson's lodgings were in a narrow street near Russell Square, a modest flat above a baker's shop. The door was ajar. When they arrived, the lock scratched and bent. Watson's hand went to his revolver as Holmes pushed the door open, revealing a room in chaos. Papers scattered, furniture overturned, a faint smell of smoke lingering. Someone's been here, Watson said, his voice tense. Grayson? Holmes moved silently, his eyes scanning the mess. He knelt by a desk, picking up a torn piece of paper with a rough sketch of the crescent moon symbol. Recent, he said, holding it up. Grayson was drawing this before he left, or was taken. Watson's stomach churned. Taken? You think our shadow got to him? Holmes's face was grim. Possibly, or he fled. Either way, he's part of this. Look here. He pointed to a small notebook, half hidden under a fallen chair. It was filled with Grayson's handwriting, frantic notes about the statues, the whispers, and a name. Khepri's Chosen. This suggests a group, Watson. Not just one shadow, but several, working together. Watson's heart pounded. A group? Like a cult? Holmes, this is getting out of hand. Holmes slipped the notebook into his pocket. Not a cult, Watson, but a purpose. Someone believes in the silent gate enough to kill for it. We return to the museum tomorrow and we watch Thorne closely. He's our link to the truth. As they left Grayson's flat, the evening fog was rolling in, wrapping London in a gray shroud. Watson felt the weight of the mystery growing heavier, the echoes of an ancient past reaching into the present. Holmes, however, was undeterred, his mind cutting through the fog like a blade. The silent gate was closer, and Watson knew they were running out of time to keep it shut. Chapter 10. A trail of dust and shadows. The evening fog clung to London streets, swirling around the gas lamps as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson stepped out of Grayson's ransacked flat. The notebook they had found, filled with Grayson's frantic scribbles about Khepri's Chosen and the crescent moon symbol, weighed heavily in Holmes's pocket. Watson's mind was racing, the image of the overturned furniture and the faint smell of smoke in Grayson's room gnawing at him. The curator was either hiding or in danger, and the shadowy figure or figures stalking them was growing bolder. Holmes's stride was brisk, his eyes scanning the foggy street. We're being watched, Watson, he said, his voice low. Our shadow knows we're close. Grayson's notebook is a clue they didn't mean for us to find. Watson's hand rested on his revolver, his nerves taut. Khepri's Chosen, he said, the name bitter on his tongue. Sounds like a secret society. Do you think they're the ones carving the symbols? Trying to open this gate? Holmes nodded, his expression grim. Likely. The symbols, snake, star, moon, are part of a sequence, as Dr. Harrow suggested. Each one brings us closer to their goal. Grayson's notes mention the Chosen as believers in Khepri's power. But he doesn't name them. We need to find him before they do. Where to now? Watson asked, glancing over his shoulder at the empty street. The fog seemed to pulse with hidden eyes. The docks, Holmes said. Grayson mentioned a shipment in his notes, something about crates marked with the snake symbol arriving with the statues. If Khepri's Chosen are moving materials, the docks are where we'll find traces. And I suspect our shadow isn't far behind. The cab ride to the London docks was tense, the fog thickening as they neared the Thames. The air grew sharp with the smell of salt and tar, and the distant clatter of cranes and shouts of dock workers cut through the haze. Holmes directed the driver to a warehouse near the wharf where the statue's ship had docked, its looming shape barely visible in the dim light. The warehouse was a cavernous space, filled with crates and barrels, the air heavy with dust and the tang of river water. A lone watchman, half asleep at a desk, barely glanced at Holmes's forged customs papers before waving them through. Watson's heart pounded as they moved deeper into the maze of crates, his revolver ready in his pocket. The shadows here were thick, shifting with every flicker of their lantern. Holmes's eyes darted over the crates, searching for the snake symbol. Grayson's notes mentioned a second shipment, he murmured. Not statues, but something smaller, marked with the same symbol we found on the Guardians. They searched for nearly an hour, moving silently until Watson spotted it. A small crate tucked behind a stack of barrels, its lid stamped with the coiled snake symbol. "Holmes, here," he whispered, pointing. Holmes knelt, his fingers tracing the mark. "Fresh paint," he said. "This was added recently, likely to hide it among the other cargo." He pried the lid open with a crowbar from his satchel, revealing a collection of stone fragments, each no larger than a fist, all bearing symbols, some snakes, some stars, some moons. A faint hum like the one from the statues pulsed from the crate. Watson's skin prickled. "More fragments, like Miss Carver's. Are these for the ritual?" Holmes nodded, lifting a fragment to study it. "Almost certainly. The hum suggests they're made of the same basalt as the statues, designed to resonate with them. Khepri's chosen are gathering materials, Watson. Materials to complete the sequence." He slipped one fragment into his pocket and closed the crate. "We take this and leave. The watchman may not be as sleepy as he seems." As they turned to go, a shadow moved at the edge of the lantern's light, a figure, cloaked and swift, darting behind a stack of crates. Watson drew his revolver, his voice sharp. "Holmes, there!" Holmes was already moving, his lantern raised, but the figure was fast, slipping through the maze of cargo. The chase was chaotic, crates looming, like walls in the dim light, the hum of the fragments seeming to echo in Watson's ears. They cornered the figure near a loading door, but it was locked, trapping their quarry. "Show yourself," Watson called, his revolver steady. The figure froze, then slowly turned, their face hidden by a scarf. In the lantern's glow, Watson saw a glint of metal, a knife, held low but ready. Holmes stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "Drop the knife. We only want answers. Who are you, and what are Khepri's chosen planning?" The figure hesitated, then spoke. Their voice muffled but clear, with a trace of an accent Watson couldn't place. "You're meddling in things you can't understand, Holmes. The gate will open and Khepri will rise. Leave the fragments or you'll regret it." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "You're not in a position to make threats. Tell me who you serve, or we'll have this conversation with the police." The figure laughed, a low, bitter sound. "The police. They're nothing compared to what's coming." With a sudden move, they hurled the knife, not at Holmes or Watson, but at a rope, holding a stack of barrels. The rope snapped and the barrels tumbled, forcing Holmes and Watson to dive aside. By the time they scrambled to their feet, the figure was gone, the loading door ajar, swinging in the fog. Watson cursed, his heart racing. "They're like a ghost, Holmes. How do they keep slipping away?" Holmes brushed dust from his coat, his face grim but focused. "Not a ghost, Watson, a trained operative. They know the warehouse, the museum, even our home. Khepri's chosen are organized, and they're desperate." He held up the stolen fragment. "But we have this, and it's more than they wanted us to find." They left the warehouse, the fog swallowing their steps as they hailed a cab back to Baker Street. Watson's mind churned with questions. The fragments, the shadowy figure, the threat of the gate opening. "Holmes," he said, "what do we do now? Thorne's hiding something, Grayson's missing, and these chosen are one step ahead." Holmes's eyes gleamed in the cab's dim light. "We follow the trail, Watson. The fragments are key to the ritual, and the symbols are the code. Tomorrow, we confront Thorne again, and we find Grayson. Khepri's chosen are moving fast, but They've made a mistake. They've shown us their hand. As the cab rattled through the foggy streets, Watson felt the weight of the mystery pressing harder. The hum of the fragments, the whispers of the statues, the shadows warning, it was all leading somewhere dark. Holmes, however, was undeterred, his mind already mapping the next move. The trail of dust and shadows was growing clearer, but Watson feared what they'd find at its end. Chapter 11. The Locked Room. Mystery. The dawn light crept through the fog, casting a pale glow over London as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson hurried toward the British Museum. The night's chase at the docks had left Watson shaken, the shadowy, figures warning, "Khepri will rise," echoing in his mind. The new basalt fragment, etched with the coiled snake symbol, sat heavy in Holmes's satchel, alongside Grayson's notebook and Miss Carver's journal. Each clue pointed to a growing threat, and Watson felt the silent gate's shadow looming larger. Holmes was silent during the cab ride, his sharp eyes fixed on the passing streets, his mind clearly piecing together the puzzle. Watson clutched, his revolver, the weight of it a small comfort against the unknown. "Holmes," he said, breaking the quiet. "That figure last night, they knew you by name. Khepri's chosen aren't just watching us, they're targeting us." Holmes nodded, his expression grim. "They're organized, Watson, and bold. The fragments and symbols suggest a ritual in progress, and we're interfering. But their boldness is a weakness. They're leaving traces. Today we press Thorne harder and find Grayson. He's the link we're missing." The museum was just opening, its halls still quiet as they entered. Sir Charles Warrington met them at the entrance, his face pale and his hands fidgeting. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice tight. "There's been an incident. It's Grayson. He's locked himself in a storeroom. We can't get him out, and he's not answering." Watson's heart sank. Locked himself? In? Or was he locked in? Sir Charles shook his head. "I don't know. The door's bolted from the inside, and there's no response. I was about to call the police, but I thought you should see it first." Holmes's eyes gleamed with interest. "Show us. Now." They followed Sir Charles to a narrow corridor behind the antiquities wing, where a heavy oak door stood shut, its lock gleaming with fresh scratches. A small crowd of museum staff hovered nearby, whispering nervously. Holmes waved them back and knelt by the door, his magnifying glass out. "The scratches are recent," he said, "but the bolt is indeed drawn from within. Curious. Grayson's either barricaded himself or someone's staged a clever scene." Watson pressed his ear to the door, hearing nothing but silence. "Grayson," he called, pounding on the wood. "It's Watson and Holmes. Open the door." No answer came, only the faint echo of his knocks. Holmes stood, his face set. "We need to get inside. Sir Charles, fetch a crowbar and clear the staff. Watson, stand ready." As Sir Charles hurried off, Watson's unease grew. "Holmes, if Grayson's in there, why isn't he answering? What if Khepri's chosen got to him?" Holmes's voice was low. "If they did, they've left us another puzzle. A locked room is no accident, it's a message." Sir Charles returned with a crowbar, and Holmes worked quickly, prying the door open with a splintering crack. The storeroom was small, cluttered, with crates and artifacts, the air thick with dust. Edward Grayson lay slumped against the far wall, his eyes closed, his face pale as death. A small pool of blood stained the floor beneath his hand where a shallow cut marked his wrist. Watson rushed to him, checking for a pulse. "He's alive," he said, relief flooding his voice. "But he's weak, lost some blood, not enough to kill him. He's been drugged, I'd wager." Holmes scanned the room, his eyes darting over every detail. No windows, no other doors. The bolt was drawn from inside, yet someone attacked him. "Look here." He pointed to a faint trail of dust on the floor leading to a crate near Grayson. Basalt dust, like the statues, and this. He lifted a small cloth from the crate, revealing a fresh carving. A new symbol, a jagged spiral etched into the wood. Watson's stomach churned. Another symbol? They were here, Holmes, but how? The door was locked from the inside. Holmes's gaze was intense. A locked room is only impossible until you find the trick. Check Grayson's pockets. Watson searched the curator's coat, finding a crumpled note tucked inside. He handed it to Holmes, who read it aloud. The gate stirs. Khepri waits. The handwriting was sharp, unfamiliar, and the paper smelled faintly of smoke. Another message, Holmes said, slipping the note into his satchel. Khepri's chosen are taunting us, Watson. They want us to know they're close. He knelt by the crate, examining the spiral symbol. This is new, not in the journal or Grayson's notes. The sequence is evolving. Watson bandaged Grayson's wrist with his handkerchief, his mind racing. Holmes, how did they get in and out? There's no other way in. Holmes moved to the walls, tapping them with his knuckles. There's always a way, Watson. Look here. He pressed a panel behind a stack of crates and it clicked, sliding open to reveal a narrow passage, barely wide enough for a man. A service tunnel, likely used by staff. Our shadow knew it was here. Watson stared, his heart pounding. They drugged Grayson, cut him, carved that symbol, and slipped out through this? But why leave him alive? Holmes's eyes darkened. To send a warning. Grayson's fear made him a liability to them, but they need him, or us, to keep the ritual moving. The blood on the note, the symbols. It's all part of their plan. Sir Charles, hovering at the door, looked horrified. What kind of madness is this? Who's doing this to my museum? Holmes ignored him, helping Watson lift Grayson to a crate to sit. The curator stirred, his eyes fluttering open, wild with fear. They came for me, he whispered. In the dark, said Khepri, seize me. I locked the door, but they were already inside. Holmes leaned close, his voice firm. Who, Grayson? Did you see their faces? Grayson shook his head, trembling. Masks, cloaks. They spoke of the gate, said it's almost time. They took my sketches, my notes, but left that. He pointed to the crate with the spiral symbol. Holmes stood, his mind racing. We're running out of time, Watson. The symbols are appearing faster, and Khepri's chosen are growing reckless. We need to find their base, their leader. Grayson, you're coming with us. You're not safe here. As they helped Grayson to a cab, Watson's mind churned with questions. The locked room, the new symbol, the hidden passage. It was a puzzle within a puzzle, and Khepri's chosen were always one step ahead. Holmes, however, was undeterred, his eyes burning with purpose. The trail is hot, Watson, he said as the cab rattled toward Baker Street. The spiral is their latest move, and we'll use it to find them. Watson nodded, but the weight of the mystery pressed harder. The silent gate was stirring, and he feared what would happen when it finally opened. Chapter 12. Whispers in the Fog. The fog rolled back over London as Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, and a shaken Edward Grayson stepped out of the cab at 221B Baker Street. The night was deep, the gas lamps casting weak halos that barely cut through the gray haze. Grayson clutched his bandaged wrist, his eyes darting nervously as if expecting Khepri's chosen to leap from the shadows. Watson kept a hand near his revolver, the locked room mystery and the new spiral symbol weighing on his mind. Holmes, however, was calm, his sharp eyes scanning the street as he ushered them inside. The sitting room was warm, the fire crackling, but the air felt heavy with tension. Holmes set Grayson in a chair, pouring him a glass of brandy to steady his nerves. Now, Mr. Grayson, Holmes said, his voice firm but not unkind, tell us everything. From the moment you first heard, the statues to the attack in the storeroom. Leave nothing out. Grayson took a shaky sip, his face pale. It started a week ago, he said, his voice low. The whispers late at night in the antiquities wing. I thought it was my imagination, but they kept coming. Words I couldn't understand like a chant. Then I saw the snake symbol, carved on the first statue. I told Sir Charles, but he said it was vandalism. I started sketching the symbols, trying to make sense of them. Watson leaned forward, his notebook open. And Khepri's chosen? When did you hear of them? Grayson's eyes widened, his hands trembling. In the storeroom, when they attacked me, they wore masks, dark cloth with slits for eyes. One of them spoke, said I'd seen too much. that Keeprie's chosen would finish what was started. They cut my wrist, said my blood was an offering. I locked the door, but they were already inside through that passage. I passed out, thought I was done for. Holmes's fingers tapped the arm of his chair, his mind racing. The spiral, symbol on the crate, was it there before they attacked you? Grayson shook his head. No, I didn't see it until they were gone. They must have carved it while I was out. Watson's stomach churned. An offering? Holmes, this is sounding more like a ritual every minute. Blood, symbols, whispers. What are they trying to do? Holmes stood, pacing to the window, where the fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. They're preparing, Watson. The symbols, snake, star, moon, spiral, are steps in a sequence, as Dr. Harrow suggested. The blood, the fragments, the statue's hum, it's all part of a ritual to open the silent gate. Keprie's chosen believe in its power, and they're willing to kill to see it through. Grayson shuddered, clutching the brandy glass. What is the gate? I don't understand. Are they trying to summon something? Holmes turned, his eyes sharp. Not summon, Mr. Grayson. Awaken. The journal and Dr. Harrow's insights point to a gate tied to Kepri, a force or place of immense power. The statues are its guardians, and the symbols are the key. But we're missing something. Why now? And who leads these chosen? A faint sound outside, a low guttural murmur like the whispers from the museum, made Watson freeze. He stood, revolver in hand, and moved to the window. Holmes, did you hear that? Holmes was already there, peering into the fog. The sound came again, soft but clear, a string of words in an unknown tongue drifting from the street below. The whispers, Holmes said, his voice low. They've followed us. Grayson's face went white, and he shrank back in his chair. It's them! They've found me! Watson gripped his revolver, his heart pounding. How is this possible, Holmes? The statues are at the museum. Holmes's eyes gleamed with a mix of curiosity and urgency. Not the statues, Watson. Something else. The fragments, perhaps, or another mechanism. Stay with Grayson. He grabbed his coat and lantern, heading for the door. I'm going to find the source. Watson protested. Holmes, you can't go alone. It's a trap. But Holmes was already gone, his footsteps fading into the fog. Watson cursed under his breath, torn between guarding Grayson and following his friend. He chose to stay, locking the door and keeping his revolver ready. The whispers continued, faint but persistent, seeming to come from all directions. Grayson whimpered, his eyes wide with fear. They're here, Dr. Watson. They'll kill us, both. Pull yourself together, Watson snapped, though his own nerves were frayed. He moved to the window, peering out, but the fog was too thick, swallowing everything beyond a few feet. The whispers grew louder, then stopped abruptly, leaving a silence that felt heavier than the sound. Minutes dragged on, each one an eternity. Watson's grip on the revolver tightened, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of intrusion. Grayson sat hunched, muttering to himself, his brandy untouched. Then, a sharp rap at the door made them both jump. Watson, it's me, came Holmes's voice, calm but urgent. Watson unlocked the door, relief flooding him as Holmes stepped inside, his coat damp and his face grim. What did you find? Watson asked, lowering his revolver. Holmes held up a small object. A basalt fragment identical to the ones from the docks, etched with the spiral symbol. This was on the street, tucked against the wall. It was humming, Watson. Just like the statues. Someone placed it here to draw us out, or to watch us. Watson's blood ran cold. Keprie's chosen? They were outside our door? Holmes nodded, slipping the fragment into his satchel. They're closer than we thought. This fragment is a beacon, likely amplifying the whispers. They're taunting us, Watson, but they've made a mistake. Leaving this behind gives us another piece of their puzzle. Grayson's voice trembled. What do we do now? They know where I am. Where you are. Holmes's smile was thin but determined. We use their boldness against them. Tomorrow, we return to the museum and set a trap. Khepri's chosen are moving faster, but they're not flawless. We'll find their leader and we'll stop this ritual before the gate opens. As Holmes spoke, Watson felt the fog outside pressing closer, the whispers lingering in his mind. The silent gate was no longer just a mystery. It was a threat, growing stronger with every symbol carved. Holmes's confidence was a lifeline, but Watson couldn't shake the fear that they were walking into the heart of something ancient and unstoppable. Chapter 13. The Hidden Chamber. The morning sun struggled through London's persistent fog, casting a dim light over the British Museum as Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, and a still-shaken Edward Grayson approached its grand entrance. The events of the previous night, the whispers outside 221B, the basalt fragment with its spiral symbol, had left Watson on edge, his revolver a constant weight in his pocket. Holmes, however, was focused, his satchel bulging with the journal, fragments, and Grayson's notebook, each item a thread in the web of the silent gate mystery. Grayson trailed behind, his eyes darting nervously. "Mr. Holmes, are you sure it's safe to come back? Khepri's chosen, they know I'm with you now." Holmes's voice was sharp but calm. "Safe or not, Mr. Grayson, you're our best lead. Your sketches and notes connect the symbols to the ritual. Stay close, and speak only when I ask." He glanced at Watson. "Keep your eyes open, Watson. Our shadow will be watching." Inside, the museum felt colder, the air heavy with the scent of stone and secrets. Sir Charles Warrington met them in the antiquities wing, his face etched with worry. "Mr. Holmes, there's been no new symbol since yesterday, but the staff are on edge. And Professor Thorne. He's locked himself in his office, says he's working on something urgent." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Thorne's timing is convenient. We'll see him soon, but first, I want to examine the statues again. There's something we've missed, a mechanism, a clue, something tied to the hum and whispers." The four statues stood in their silent circle, their blank gazes as unsettling as ever. Holmes circled them, his magnifying glass out, studying every inch of their basalt surfaces. Watson watched, his hand near his revolver, while Grayson hovered near the entrance, visibly trembling. The memory of the locked room attack lingered, and Watson couldn't shake the feeling that Khepri's chosen were close. Holmes paused at the statue with the spiral symbol, his fingers tracing the faint seams he'd noted before. "These joints," he murmured. "They're too precise for ancient stonework. And the warmth. It's stronger today, Watson. Feel it." Watson touched the statue, startled by the subtle heat under his palm. "It's like it's alive," he said, his voice low. "Holmes, what are these things?" "Not alive," Holmes said, "but active. The fragments we found resonate with the statues, amplifying their vibrations. I suspect there's a chamber or mechanism beneath them, tied to the silent gate." He knelt, tapping the marble floor at the center of the statue's circle. A faint, hollow echo answered. Watson's heart quickened. "A chamber? Under the floor?" Holmes nodded, his eyes gleaming. "The statues face inward, guarding something. The journal mentions a gate, and Dr. Harrow spoke of a hidden realm. If there's a chamber here, it's the key." He turned to Sir Charles. "Have you ever explored beneath this wing?" Sir Charles frowned, shaking his head. "The museum's built on solid ground, Mr. Holmes. There are cellars, but nothing directly under here, at least not that I know of." Holmes's smile was thin. "Then we'll find out. Fetch tools, crowbars, hammers, anything to lift this floor." Sir Charles hesitated but obeyed, returning with two workers carrying tools. Holmes directed them to pry at the marble tiles in the center of the statue's circle. The workers grumbled, but set to work, the clink of metal on stone echoing in the quiet wing. After several tense minutes, a tile shifted, revealing a dark gap beneath. Holmes raised his lantern, peering into the hole. A narrow stone staircase spiraled down into darkness, its edges worn but intact. "A hidden chamber," he said, his voice alive with excitement. "Watson, Grayson, with me. Sir Charles, keep your men here and let no one enter." Watson's stomach twisted, but he followed Holmes down the stairs, Grayson trailing reluctantly. The air grew colder as they descended. The smell of damp stone and ancient dust thickened their noses. The lantern's light revealed a small chamber, its walls carved with symbols, snakes, stars, moons, spirals, and others Watson didn't recognize. At the center stood a low stone altar, its surface etched with a large coiled snake symbol, stained dark with what looked like dried blood. Grayson gasped, stepping back. This is what they meant. The gate. It's here. Holmes moved to the altar, his magnifying glass out. Blood, old but not ancient. And these carvings. He traced the symbols, his brow furrowed. They match the journal, but there's more here, a sequence we haven't seen. The ritual is tied to this chamber, Watson. The statues above are its guardians, and the fragments are its keys. Watson's eyes scanned the shadows, his revolver ready. Holmes, if this is the gate, why are Khepri's chosen carving symbols now? To open it? Holmes nodded, his voice low. Or to ensure it stays closed. The journal warns of the gate opening, but it also speaks of sealing it. Khepri's chosen may be divided. Some want to awaken the gate, others to stop it. He paused, his eyes narrowing. Listen. A faint hum filled the chamber, like the one from the statues, but deeper, resonating through the stone. Then came the whispers, soft, urgent, in that same strange language. They seemed to come from the walls, or the altar itself growing louder with each passing second. Grayson whimpered, backing toward the stairs. They're here! They've found us! Watson gripped his revolver, his heart pounding. Holmes, we need to get out. This place, it's not safe. Holmes held up a hand, his focus absolute. Not yet, Watson. The whispers are a clue. They're triggered by our presence or the fragments. He pulled the spiral-marked fragment from his satchel and placed it on the altar. The hum intensified, the whispers sharpening into a single word, Khepri. The altar trembled, a faint crack appearing along its edge. Dust fell from the ceiling, and Watson grabbed Holmes's arm. Holmes, it's moving. We need to go. Holmes snatched the fragment back and the hum faded, the whispers stopping abruptly. Fascinating, he murmured, his eyes alight. The altar is part of the mechanism. The symbols, the fragments, they're activating something, but we're not ready to face it yet. As they climbed the stairs, Watson's mind raced. The chamber, the blood, the whispers. It was all too much. Holmes, what is this gate? A door to what? Holmes's face was grim as they emerged into the antiquities wing. I don't know yet, Watson. But Khepri's chosen do, and they're closer to their goal than we are. We need to find their leader, and we need Thorne to talk. Sir Charles was waiting, his face pale. What did you find down there? A chamber, Holmes said, and a clue to the silent gate. Guard this. Entrance, Sir Charles. No one goes near it until we return. He turned to Watson and Grayson. We're going to Thorne's office. It's time he told us everything. As they moved through the museum, Watson felt the weight of the hidden chamber pressing on him. The whispers lingered in his ears, and the name Khepri felt like a warning. Holmes's determination was unshaken, but Watson feared they were stepping deeper into a trap, one set thousands of years ago. Chapter 14. A study in motives, the air in the British Museum felt heavy as Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, and Edward Grayson hurried through its echoing halls toward Professor Alistair Thorne's office. The discovery of the hidden chamber beneath, the antiquities wing, with its blood-stained altar and whispering symbols, had sharpened the urgency of their mission. Watson's heart still raced from the altar's tremble and the eerie chant of Khepri, while Grayson's face was pale, his steps unsteady. Holmes, however, moved with purpose, his satchel holding the journal fragments and Grayson's notebook, his mind slicing through the mystery like a blade. Watson gripped his revolver, the weight of it grounding him against the growing sense of dread. Holmes, he whispered as they neared the office, that chamber, it's the heart of this. The blood, the symbols, the whispers. Keepri's chosen are trying to open that gate, aren't they? Holmes's eyes flicked to him, sharp and focused. Or keep it closed, Watson. Thorne's fear, Grayson's attack, the symbols appearing faster. There's a struggle here, between those who want the silent gate opened and those who don't. Thorne knows which side he's on, and will have the truth from him. Grayson, clutching his bandaged wrist, looked ready to bolt. What if he's one of them? Kepri's chosen? He found the statues, Mr. Holmes. He could be their leader. Holmes's lips twitched into a grim smile. If he is, he's a poor one, hiding in his office. But his motives are key. Stay sharp, both of you. They reached Thorne's office, a heavy door tucked in a quiet corridor. Holmes knocked sharply, but no answer came. He tested the handle, locked. Curious, he murmured, pulling a small tool from his pocket and working the lock with deft fingers. The door clicked open, revealing a dimly lit room cluttered with books, maps, and artifacts. Professor Thorne sat at his desk, his head in his hands, a half-empty bottle of brandy beside him. Thorne looked up, his eyes bloodshot and wary. "Holmes," he said, his voice rough. "What do you want now? I've told you everything." Holmes stepped inside, Watson and Grayson behind him. "Not everything, Professor," Holmes said, his tone cold. "We found a chamber beneath the antiquities wing, with an altar and symbols matching those on the statues. The journal you hid speaks of a ritual, and Kepri's name echoes in the stone. You know what the silent gate is. Speak, or I'll assume you're with Kepri's chosen." Thorne's face drained of color, his hands trembling as he reached for the brandy. "You found the chamber? You fools, you've no idea what you're stirring." He took a shaky sip, his eyes darting to the door. "I'm not one of them, Holmes, I swear it. I've been trying to stop them." Watson's grip tightened on his revolver. "Stop who? Kepri's chosen? Who are they?" Thorne's voice dropped to a whisper. "A group, fanatics, scholars, madmen, who believe the silent gate leads to power beyond imagining. They call themselves Kepri's chosen, after the god of rebirth. They think opening the gate will awaken Kepri's power, remake the world. I found their texts in Egypt, with the statues. I thought I could control it, study it, but they've been watching me since." Holmes leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "And the symbols? The snake, star, moon, spiral? Why are they carving them now?" Thorne hesitated, his gaze flickering. To Grayson. "The symbols are the ritual steps. Each one activates the statues, draws the gate closer to opening. The blood, Grayson's, the workers in Egypt, it's part of it, an offering to Kepri. I tried to stop them, to hide the journal, but they're everywhere." Watson's stomach churned. "You knew about the blood? And you did nothing?" Thorne's face crumpled. "I was afraid. They threatened me, my family. They said if I spoke, they'd open the gate and let Kepri judge me. I thought I could keep it sealed by hiding the fragments, but they've found them." Holmes pulled the spiral-marked fragment from his satchel, holding it up. "Like this? We found it outside our home, humming like the statues. Who's leading them, Thorne? Give me a name." Thorne shook his head, his voice breaking. "I don't. No, they wear masks, speak in shadows, but there's one, a woman, I think. I heard her voice at the dig, giving orders. She's ruthless, Holmes. She'll kill to open the gate." Watson glanced at Holmes, thinking of Miss Carver. Could she be involved? Her fear had seemed real, but Thorne's words planted doubt. "A woman?" Watson asked. "Did you see her?" "No," Thorne said. "Only heard her. She spoke of Kepri as if he were alive, waiting. She's the one carving the symbols, I'm sure of it." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "And Grayson? Why attack him?" Thorne glanced at Grayson, who shrank back. He saw too much, sketched the symbols, asked questions. They wanted to silence him, but not kill him, not yet. His blood was enough for now. Grayson's voice trembled. "They'll come for me again, won't they?" Holmes ignored him, his focus on Thorne. "You've been playing a dangerous game, Professor. Hiding the truth, letting Kepri's chosen move freely. Where are they now? Where do they meet?" Thorne's hands shook, spilling brandy on the desk. "I don't know. They're careful, always moving. But I heard them mention a place, an old warehouse near the docks where the statues were stored. That's all I know. Holmes stood, slipping the fragment back into his satchel. Then we'll start there. Watson, Grayson, we're leaving. Professor, stay here and speak to no one. If you're lying, I'll know. As they left the office, Watson's mind raced. Holmes, do you believe him? About the woman, the warehouse? Holmes's face was grim. He's telling part of the truth, but fear makes him unreliable. The warehouse is a lead and we'll follow it tonight. But we must be cautious. Keepers chosen are watching and they know we're close. Outside, the fog was thickening again, wrapping the museum in a gray shroud. Watson felt the weight of Thorne's words. The woman, the blood, the gates, power. Holmes's determination was unshaken, but Watson couldn't shake the fear that they were being drawn into a trap, one set by a leader whose motives were as dark as the fog around them. Chapter 15. The Collector's Gambit. The fog hung thick over London's docks, muffling the creak of ships and the distant calls of night workers as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson stepped from their cab. The warehouse Professor Thorne had mentioned loomed ahead, a dark hulk against the misty Thames, its windows black and silent. Watson's hand rested on his revolver, the weight of it a steady anchor against the unease that had grown since their meeting with Thorne. The professor's talk of a mysterious woman leading Kepri's chosen, and the ritual to open the silent gate felt like a noose tightening around them. Holmes carried his satchel, heavy with the journal, basalt fragments, and Grayson's notebook, his eyes scanning the shadows. Edward Grayson had been left at Baker Street under Mrs. Hudson's watchful eye, too shaken to join them. "Stay alert, Watson," Holmes said, his voice low. "The warehouse is a likely base for Kepri's chosen. If Thorne's telling the truth, we'll find evidence here, perhaps even their leader." Watson nodded, his breath visible in the cold air. "And if it's a trap? Thorne could be setting us up, Holmes. He's scared, but I don't trust him." Holmes's lips twitched into a grim smile. "Nor do I, but his fear is our leverage. The warehouse is a lead, and Kepri's chosen are growing careless. That fragment outside our door was a mistake. They're desperate, and desperation breeds errors." They approached the warehouse, its iron door rusted but solid. Holmes knelt, inspecting the lock with a small tool from his pocket. "Fresh scratches," he murmured. "Someone's been here recently." With a quick twist, he picked the lock and the door creaked open, revealing a cavernous space filled with crates and the sharp smell of damp wood and river mud. The lantern's light cast long shadows as they moved inside, their footsteps muffled by dust. Watson's heart pounded, the memory of their last chase here vivid, barrels crashing, a knife glinting, the shadowy figure slipping away. "Holmes," he whispered, "if they're here, they'll know the place better than we do." Holmes nodded, his eyes darting over the crates. "Which is why we move carefully. Look for the snake symbol or anything tied to the statues." He pulled the spiral-marked fragment from his satchel, holding it up. A faint hum answered, barely audible, but enough to make Watson's skin prickle. They searched the maze of crates, finding nothing at first, but old cargo. Ropes, barrels, sacks of grain. Then, near the back, Holmes stopped at a large crate, its lid marked with the coiled snake symbol, half hidden under a tarp. "Here," he said, prying it open with his crowbar. Inside were more basalt fragments, dozens of them, each etched with symbols: snakes, stars, moons, spirals, and others unfamiliar. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the air. Watson's voice was tense. "More fragments, enough to..." "What? Finish the ritual?" Holmes lifted a fragment, studying it. "Possibly. These are like the ones we found before, designed to resonate with the statues. But look." He pointed to a small ledger tucked among the fragments, its pages filled with names, dates, and locations. A record of shipments. The statues, the fragments, all tracked here. And this... He flipped to a page with a name circled in red. Lord Reginald Ashford. Watson frowned. "Ashford? The collector? I've heard of him. Rich, eccentric, buys up relics like they're trinkets." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. Ashford's known for his obsession with ancient artifacts, particularly Egyptian. If he's involved with Khepri's chosen, he could be funding them, or leading them. Before Watson could respond, a soft scrape echoed from the shadows, a boot on the floor. He spun, revolver raised as Holmes dimmed the lantern. "They're here," Watson whispered, his heart racing. Holmes motioned for silence, his eyes scanning the darkness. A figure moved, swift and cloaked, slipping behind a stack of crates. Watson's grip tightened, but Holmes held up a hand, signaling to wait. "They don't know we've seen them," he murmured. "Let's draw them out." Holmes set the ledger back in the crate, leaving it slightly ajar, and moved to a nearby shadow, pulling Watson with him. They crouched, watching as the figure crept closer, their face hidden by a scarf. The figure reached for the ledger, but Holmes sprang forward, grabbing their wrist. "Not so fast," he said, his voice sharp. The figure twisted, pulling a knife. But Watson was ready, his revolver trained on them. "Drop it," he barked. The knife clattered to the floor, and Holmes yanked the scarf away, revealing a young man, his face pale and defiant, with sharp features and dark eyes. "Who are you?" Holmes demanded. "And what does Lord Ashford want with the silent gate?" The man's lips curled into a sneer. "You're too late, Holmes. The gate's waking. Ashford knows its power, and Khepri's chosen will see it through." Watson's blood ran cold. "Ashford's the leader?" The man laughed, bitter and short. "Leader? He's a pawn like you. The true chosen serve Khepri, not men." Before Holmes could press further, the man lunged, knocking over a crate. Fragments spilled, their hum rising to a deafening buzz, and the man darted into the shadows. Holmes gave chase, Watson close behind, but the maze of crates and the fog outside swallowed the man's trail. They stopped, breathless, at the warehouse door. "He's gone," Watson said, frustration thick in his voice. "But we have the ledger, Holmes, and Ashford's name." Holmes's face was grim but focused. "Ashford's our next move. He's no pawn, whatever our friend claims. A collector with his wealth and obsession doesn't sit idly by. We'll visit him tomorrow, Watson, and see what he knows of Khepri's chosen." As they left the warehouse, the fog seemed to pulse with unseen eyes. Watson clutched the ledger, its pages a map to a new suspect. Holmes's mind was already racing, but Watson felt the weight of the mystery growing heavier. Lord Ashford, the fragments, the hum of the gate, it was all converging, and he feared what lay at the center of Khepri's gambit. Chapter 16. Footprints in the dark. The fog clung to London like a heavy cloak as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson left the warehouse, the ledger with Lord Ashford's name tucked securely in Holmes's satchel, alongside the journal, fragments, and Grayson's notebook. The encounter with the cloaked figure, his defiance, and the claim that Ashford was a mere pawn had sharpened the mystery of Khepri's chosen. Watson's heart still raced from the chase, his revolver a cold comfort in his pocket. The hum of the basalt fragments lingered in his ears, a reminder of the silent gate's growing power. Holmes's stride was brisk, his eyes scanning the misty docks. "Ashford's involvement changes things, Watson," he said, his voice low. "A collector of his stature doesn't fund a group like Khepri's chosen without a purpose. Whether he's their leader or a tool, he's our next step." Watson nodded, his breath visible in the chill air. "But that man said Ashford's a pawn. Who's pulling the strings, Holmes? And what do they want with the gate?" Holmes's lips twitched into a grim smile. "That's what we'll find out. Ashford's estate is in Mayfair, wealthy, secluded, perfect for secrets. We'll visit him tonight, before Khepri's chosen can cover their tracks." Watson glanced back at the warehouse, its dark shape fading into the fog. "Tonight? Holmes, it's past midnight and we've been at this all day. Can't it wait?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Time is against us, Watson. The symbols are appearing faster, the ritual is advancing. If Ashford's involved, he'll expect us to move slowly. We won't." The cab ride to Mayfair was tense, the fog thickening as they moved inland. Ashford's estate loomed at the end of a quiet street, a grand mansion with tall iron gates and windows glowing faintly behind heavy curtains. Watson's nerves tightened as they approached, the silence of the wealthy district feeling more oppressive than the dock's clamor. Holmes scaled the gate with ease, motioning for Watson to follow. The grounds were dark, the fog muffling their steps as they crept toward the mansion. "Look for footprints, Watson," Holmes whispered. "If Keepre's chosen are meeting here, they'll have left traces." Watson's eyes strained in the dim light, catching a faint trail of disturbed gravel leading to a side door. "Here," he said, pointing. "Fresh marks, Holmes. Someone's been through recently." Holmes knelt, his lantern low, revealing scuffed footprints in the damp earth, small, precise like those of a careful intruder. "Not Ashford's," he murmured. "Too light. Our shadow, perhaps, or another of the chosen." He tested the side door, unlocked with scratches around the handle. "They're careless tonight." Inside, the mansion was a maze of opulence: marble, floors, gilded frames, and shelves lined with artifacts. The air smelled of polish and old stone, and Watson's skin prickled as he spotted Egyptian relics, scarabs, amulets, a small statue eerily similar to the Guardian's. Holmes moved silently, his lantern casting shadows that danced like specters. They followed the footprints to a study, its door ajar. Inside, Lord Reginald Ashford sat at a desk, his silver hair glinting in the lamplight, his face lined with exhaustion. He was older than Watson expected, nearing 60, with sharp eyes that widened as Holmes and Watson entered. "Mr. Holmes," Ashford said, his voice calm but wary. "I've been expecting you. Your reputation precedes you, but breaking into my home is bold, even for you." Holmes's tone was sharp. "As bold as funding Kepre's chosen, Lord Ashford. We found your name in a ledger tied to the silent gate. Explain yourself." Ashford's hands tightened on the desk, but he didn't flinch. "Kepre's chosen? You're chasing shadows, Holmes. I'm a collector, nothing more. I funded Thorns. Dig in Egypt, yes, but only for the artifacts. The statues, the fragments, they're treasures, not curses." Watson stepped forward, his revolver visible. "Then why are your crates marked with their symbols? Why are Kepre's chosen carving them on the statues spilling blood to open a gate?" Ashford's eyes flickered, a trace of fear breaking his composure. "Blood? I know nothing of that. I bought fragments, yes, from Thorn's dig. They're beautiful, rare. But I've heard whispers. Rumors of a group obsessed with Kepri. A gate. I thought it was nonsense until—" He hesitated, glancing at a locked cabinet behind him. Holmes followed his gaze. "Until what?" "Open the cabinet, Lord Ashford, now." Ashford sighed, pulling a key from his pocket and unlocking the cabinet. Inside were more basalt fragments, each etched with symbols: snakes, stars, moons, spirals, and a new one, a jagged eye. A faint hum pulsed from them, just like the statues. "I found these delivered to my estate last week," Ashford said. "No note, no explanation. I kept them here, away from prying eyes." Holmes lifted a fragment, his eyes narrowing. "The eye symbol, new, like the spiral. You're not a pawn, Ashford. You're in deeper than you admit." "Who sent these?" Ashford shook his head. "I don't know, I swear it. But I've had visitors, cloaked figures at night. They spoke of Kepri, of a gate that must open. I told them to leave, but they left this." He pulled a note from his desk, its handwriting matching the one from Grayson's storeroom. The gate stirs. "Kepri waits." Watson's heart pounded. "They're threatening you too? Why didn't you go to the police?" Ashford's laugh was bitter. "And say what? That my relics are haunted? I'm a collector, not a fool. But I'm not with them, Holmes. I want this stopped as much as you do." Holmes's gaze was piercing. "Then help us. Where do Kepre's chosen meet? Who leads them?" Ashford hesitated, then spoke. "I don't know their leader, but I've heard them mention a place, an old chapel near the East End abandoned years ago. They called it the Sanctum. That's all I know." Holmes pocketed the note and a fragment with the eye symbol. "We'll verify your story, Lord Ashford. Stay here and speak to no one. If you're lying, I'll know." As they left the mansion, Watson's mind churned. "Do you believe him, Holmes? He's got those fragments, and his name's in the ledger." Holmes's face was grim. "He's involved, Watson. but not the mastermind. His fear is genuine, but he's hiding something. Guilt, perhaps, for funding the dig that started this. The chapel is our next lead. Khepri's chosen are moving fast, but their footprints are clearer now. The fog swallowed them as they hailed. A cab, the night growing darker. Watson felt the weight of the new symbol, the new threat pressing down. Holmes's determination burned bright, but Watson feared the sanctum would lead them deeper into Khepri's deadly game. Chapter 17. The Statue's Riddle. The fog was a thick veil over London's East End as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson stepped from their cab, the distant clang of dockside bells barely piercing the gloom. The revelation of Lord Ashford's involvement, and the mention of an abandoned chapel as the possible sanctum of Khepri's chosen, had set Holmes's mind ablaze. Watson, gripping his revolver, felt the weight of the mystery growing heavier with each step. The basalt fragment with the jagged eye symbol, now in Holmes's satchel alongside the others, seemed to hum faintly, as if echoing the statue's whispers. Holmes's eyes scanned the narrow street, lined with crumbling buildings and shuttered shops. "The chapel Ashford mentioned is close," he said, his voice low. "If Khepri's chosen are using it, we'll find evidence. Symbols, fragments, or perhaps their leader. Stay sharp, Watson." Watson nodded, his nerves taut. "Ashford's story about being threatened. Do you buy it, Holmes? He's got those fragments and his name's tied to the dig. He could be playing us." Holmes's lips twitched into a grim smile. "He's involved, Watson, but not in control. His fear was real, but so is his ambition. Collectors like Ashford don't fund digs without expecting power or prestige. He knows more than he's saying, but the chapel will tell us what he won't." They moved through the fog, their footsteps muffled on the cobblestones, until they reached a derelict chapel, its spire broken and windows boarded. The door hung ajar, its hinges rusted, and a faint glow flickered inside, like a candle struggling against the dark. Holmes signaled for silence, dimming his lantern as they slipped inside. The chapel's interior was a ruin, pews overturned, walls stained with damp, the air thick with dust and decay. At the far end, where an altar might once have stood, a single basalt statue loomed, smaller than the guardian's but carved from the same black stone. Its surface bore the now familiar symbols: snake, star, moon, spiral, and the jagged eye. A faint hum pulsed from it, and Watson's skin prickled as he recognized the same eerie warmth from the museum. "Holmes," he whispered, his revolver ready. "It's like the Guardian's. Why is it here?" Holmes approached the statue, his magnifying glass out, studying the symbols. "A sentinel, Watson, or a marker. This chapel is no sanctum, it's a staging ground. Khepri's chosen are using it to prepare the ritual." He knelt, tracing a faint inscription at the statue's base, written in a script like the journals. "This is different," he murmured. "Not a warning, but a riddle." Watson leaned closer, squinting at the carved words. "A riddle? Can you read it?" Holmes's eyes gleamed with focus. "It's in a Proto-Egyptian script like the journal. It says 5 guard the gate, 4 stand above, 1 waits below. Speak Khepri's name and the path will show. 5 statues, Watson, not 4. The guardians in the museum are only part of it. This one is the 5th. Watson's heart pounded. "A 5th statue? Where's it been all this time?" Holmes stood, his gaze sweeping the chapel. "Hidden, likely by Khepri's chosen. The riddle suggests it's below, perhaps another chamber, like the one under the museum. The hum, the symbols, they're all connected to this 5th statue." A soft scrape from the shadows made Watson spin, his revolver raised. "Holmes, we're not alone." Holmes nodded, his body tense but calm. "They've been watching since we entered. Show yourself," he called, his voice sharp. A figure stepped from the darkness, cloaked and masked, their eyes glinting in the candlelight. Their voice was low with a familiar accent Watson couldn't place. "You're persistent, Holmes," they said, "but you're too late. The 5th statue is already in place and the gate is stirring." Watson's grip tightened. Who are you? What do you want with the gate? The figure laughed, a cold sound. Khepri's power is rebirth, a new world. The gate will open, and the chosen will rise. Leave now, or your blood will seal it. Holmes stepped forward, undeterred. A riddle. Doesn't frighten me. Where is the fifth statue? And who leads your chosen? The figure raised a hand, revealing a small basalt fragment, its surface etched with the jagged eye symbol. The hum in the chapel grew louder, the statue vibrating, faintly. The riddle is the path, Holmes. Solve it if you can. They tossed the fragment to the floor and darted toward a side door, the fog swallowing them before Watson could fire. Holmes snatched the fragment, his face grim. Another clue, Watson. They're taunting us, but they're scared. The riddle is their weakness. They need us to solve it. Watson's frustration boiled over. Solve it? Holmes, they're playing with us. Blood, symbols, statues. This is madness. Holmes's smile was sharp. Madness with a purpose. The riddle points to a chamber below. We need to find it, and we need to return to the museum. The fifth statue is the key to the ritual, and Khepri's chosen are racing to use it. They searched the chapel quickly, finding a trapdoor, hidden beneath a pile of broken pews. It led to a narrow tunnel, its walls rough and damp, but it was empty. No statue, no fragments, only faint scratches of the jagged eye symbol carved into the stone. They've moved it, Holmes said, his voice low, but the tunnel leads toward the river, likely to the docks or the museum. As they left the chapel, the fog seemed to pulse with unseen eyes. Watson's mind churned with the riddle's words. 5 statues, one below, Khepri's name. Holmes, he said, if we find this fifth statue, can we stop the ritual? Holmes's eyes were hard. We must, Watson. The gate is closer to opening than ever. Tomorrow we return to the museum and search for the fifth statue. Khepri's chosen are bold, but their riddle will betray them. The cab ride back to Baker Street was silent, the weight of the night's discoveries pressing down. Watson felt the hum of the fragment in Holmes's satchel, a reminder of the stakes. The silent gate was no longer a myth. It was a riddle, and solving it might be their only chance to stop Khepri's chosen before it was too late. Chapter 18. The Fifth Guardian. The morning fog lingered over London, a gray shroud that mirrored the unease in Dr. Watson's heart as he and Sherlock Holmes approached the British Museum once more. The riddle from the chapel, 5 guard thee, gate 4 stand above 1 waits below, had kept Watson awake, its words intertwining with the hum of the basalt fragments and the whispers of Khepri. Holmes carried his satchel, now heavier with the latest fragment bearing the jagged eye symbol, alongside the journal, Grayson's notebook, and the ledger implicating Lord Ashford. His face was set with determination, his mind clearly fixed on the fifth statue. Watson's hand rested on his revolver, the memory of the cloaked figure in the chapel sharpening his senses. Holmes, he said as they neared the museum's entrance, if this fifth statue is below, do you think it's in the chamber we found? Or somewhere else? Holmes's eyes scanned the street, ever watchful. The chamber beneath the antiquities. Wing is the logical place, Watson, but Khepri's chosen are cunning. The riddle suggests below, but it could mean another hidden space, perhaps tied to the tunnel we found in the chapel. We'll start with the chamber and work from there. Inside, the museum was quiet, the early hour keeping most visitors away. Sir Charles Warrington met them in the antiquities wing, his face haggard, as if he hadn't slept since their last visit. Mr. Holmes, he said, his voice low. The staff are terrified. Whispers of curses, statues moving. No one wants to work near the guardians. Holmes's tone was brisk. Then keep them away, Sir Charles. We need access to the chamber beneath the statues undisturbed. Where's Professor Thorne? Sir, Charles hesitated. He left last night, said he was unwell. I haven't seen him since. Watson's stomach tightened. Unwell? Or running? Holmes, he's been dodging us since we confronted him. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Or he's been silenced. We'll deal with Thorne later. For now, the fifth statue is our priority. He led the way to the hidden staircase beneath the statues, the four guardians looming above, their blank eyes seeming to follow their movements. The chamber below was, as they'd left it, cold, damp, with walls carved with symbols and the blood-stained altar at its center. The faint hum from their fragments grew stronger, resonating with the stone. Holmes set his lantern down, pulling the spiral and jagged eye fragments from his satchel. "The riddle said, 'Speak Kipri's name,'" he murmured. "We've heard the statues respond to it before. Let's try it here." Watson's heart pounded, his revolver ready. "Holmes, are you sure? Last time the altar moved. What if this triggers something worse?" Holmes's smile was thin. "Then we'll face it, Watson. We're too close to stop." He placed the fragments on the altar, aligning them with the coiled snake symbol etched into its surface. Leaning close, he spoke clearly. "Kepri." The hum surged, a deep vibration that shook the chamber. The whispers returned, sharp and urgent, echoing from the walls in a language Watson couldn't grasp. The altar trembled, dust falling from the ceiling, and a low grinding sound filled the air. A section of the wall behind the altar slid open, revealing a narrow passage, its darkness swallowing the lantern's light. Watson's breath caught. "Another chamber, Holmes. The fifth statue. It must be there." Holmes nodded, his eyes alight with anticipation. "Stay close, Watson. This is what Kepri's chosen have been hiding." He stepped into the passage, lantern raised, and Watson followed, his nerves taut. The passage was short, opening into a smaller chamber, its walls bare except for a single basalt statue at the center. It was smaller than the guardians above, but its craftsmanship was identical, smooth, black, with a faint warmth emanating from its surface. Its face bore a carved symbol, the jagged eye glowing faintly in the lantern's light. The hum was louder here, almost deafening, and the whispers formed a single, clear word: Kipri. Watson's skin prickled. "The fifth guardian," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's active, Holmes. Look at the symbol. It's glowing." Holmes approached the statue, his magnifying glass out. "Not glowing, Watson. Reflecting. The eye is inlaid with a material, perhaps obsidian, catching the light. But the hum, the warmth, this statue is the heart of the ritual." He traced the statue's base, finding a faint inscription. "Another riddle," he said, reading aloud. "1 names the god, 4 hold the key, 5 open the way. Blood seals the gate." Watson's stomach churned. "Blood again? Holmes, this is what they did to Grayson, to the worker in Egypt. They're planning to kill someone." Holmes's face was grim. "Or already have. The blood on the altar above, it's fresh enough to be recent. We need to move this statue, Watson. If we disrupt the ritual, we may delay Kipri's chosen." They pushed against the statue, its weight immense but not immovable. With effort, they shifted it aside, revealing a small recess in the floor, containing a single basalt fragment, larger than the others, etched with all 5 symbols: snake, star, moon, spiral, and eye. The hum spiked, and Watson felt a jolt, like static as Holmes lifted it. "This is it," Holmes said, his voice low. "The master fragment tying the statues together. Without it, the ritual can't proceed." He slipped it into his satchel, but as he did, a shadow moved at the passage's entrance. Watson spun, revolver raised, as a cloaked figure stepped into the light. It was the same figure from the chapel, their face masked, their voice cold. "You've found it, Holmes," they said. "But you won't leave with it. The gate must open." Holmes stepped forward, calm but ready. "Who are you? And what is the gate? Speak, or my friend's aim is true." The figure laughed, raising a hand to reveal another fragment, its hum clashing with the one in Holmes's satchel. "The gate is power, rebirth, Kipri's promise. You can't stop it, only join it." They hurled the fragment at the statue, and the hum became a screech, the chamber shaking as cracks appeared in the walls. Watson fired, but the figure was already gone, slipping back into the passage. Holmes grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the exit. "Run, Watson, the chamber's collapsing." They scrambled up the stairs, the grinding of stone behind them as the passage caved in. They burst into the antiquities wing, panting, as Sir Charles and his workers stared in shock. The guardians above stood silent, but Watson felt their presence as if they were watching. Holmes clutched the master fragment, his face set. "We have what they need, Watson. Khepri's chosen will come for it, and when they do, we'll have them." Watson's heart raced, the weight of the collapsing chamber and the figure's words pressing down. "Holmes, that fragment, it's dangerous. What if they're right? What if the gate opens?" Holmes's eyes burned with resolve. "Then we'll close it, Watson. Back to Baker Street. We need to prepare for their next move." As they left the museum, the fog seemed to whisper, "Khepri," a name that now felt like a curse. Watson knew the fifth guardian had changed everything, and the silent gate was closer than ever to opening. Chapter 19. The silent trap. The fog clung to Baker Street like a shroud as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson returned to 221B, the master basalt fragment, etched with all 5 symbols, secure in Holmes's satchel. The discovery of the fifth guardian and the collapsing chamber beneath the British Museum had left Watson shaken. The cloaked figure's words, "The gate is power, rebirth," echoing in his mind. His revolver felt heavier in his pocket, a reminder of how close danger had come. Holmes, however, was alive with purpose, his eyes sharp as he scanned the foggy street before unlocking the door. Inside, the sitting room was warm, the fire low, but steady. Edward Grayson sat by the hearth, his face pale, a cup of tea untouched in his hands. Mrs. Hudson hovered nearby, her expression a mix of concern and exasperation. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said. "This poor man's been trembling all night. What's going on?" Holmes waved her off gently. "Thank you, Mrs. Hudson. We'll handle it. Please ensure we're not disturbed." As she left, Holmes turned to Grayson, his voice firm. "Mr. Grayson, you're safe here, but we need your help. The fifth statue has been found, and we have the fragment that ties the ritual together. Tell us anything you've remembered about Khepri's chosen." Grayson's eyes widened, his hands shaking. "The fifth statue? You found it?" I don't know much more, Mr. Holmes. They attacked me, said my blood was an offering. I heard them mention a woman's voice like Professor Thorne did. She was giving orders, but I never saw her face." Watson frowned, settling into a chair, his revolver on the table. "A woman again." Thorne said the same. "Could it be Miss Carver, Holmes? She brought us the journal, but what if she's playing a double game?" Holmes paced, his fingers steepled. "Possible, Watson, but her fears seem genuine. Still, we trust no one fully. The master fragment is what Khepri's chosen need to complete the ritual. They'll come for it and we'll be ready." He pulled the fragment from his satchel, its symbols, snake, star, moon, spiral, eye, catching the firelight. A faint hum pulsed from it, setting Watson's nerves on edge. Grayson shrank back. "That thing, it's like the statues. It feels wrong." Holmes's smile was grim. "Wrong, but crucial. The riddle said 5 open the way, blood seals the gate. This fragment is the key, and blood, Grayson's the workers, activates it. We'll use it to draw Khepri's chosen out." He turned to Watson. "We set a trap, Watson. Here, tonight. They know we have the fragment and they're desperate." Watson's heart quickened. "A trap? In our own home? Holmes, that's risky. They've been to Baker Street before. Those whispers. The fragment outside our door." "Exactly," Holmes said, his eyes gleaming. "They're bold, and we'll use that against them. We'll make it seem we're unguarded, careless. Grayson, you'll stay visible by the window as bait. Watson, you'll watch the street. I'll hide in the shadows, ready to strike." Grayson's voice trembled. "Bait? They'll kill me." Holmes's tone was sharp. "They need you alive, Mr. Grayson, for the ritual. Stay calm and follow my lead." He moved to the window, adjusting the curtains to leave a gap, then dimmed the lamps, casting the room in flickering shadows. Watson took his post by the side window, revolver in hand, his eyes straining through the fog. The street was quiet, the gas lamps barely visible. Holmes slipped into a dark corner, his silhouette blending with the furniture, a predator waiting for prey. Grayson sat by the fire, his nervous fidgeting making him the perfect lure. Minutes stretched into an hour, the silence broken only by the clock's tick and Grayson's uneven breaths. Watson's nerves were taut, the hum of the fragment on the fee table like a heartbeat. Then a faint scrape outside, a boot on the pavement soft but unmistakable. Watson's grip tightened, his eyes catching a shadow moving through the fog, cloaked and swift. "Holmes," he whispered, barely audible. Holmes nodded, his hand on a concealed knife, his body coiled like a spring. The shadow paused outside the window, peering through the gap. Watson held his breath, watching as the figure tested the window's latch. It clicked open and the figure slipped inside, silent as a ghost, their face masked, a chisel glinting in their hand. They moved toward Grayson, who froze, his eyes wide with terror. Holmes struck, lunging from the shadows, his knife pinning the figure's sleeve to the table. Watson was at their side in an instant, revolver trained. "Don't move," he barked. The figure struggled, but Holmes's grip was iron. He yanked the mask away, revealing a woman's face. Not Miss Carver, but a stranger, her features sharp and fierce, her dark eyes blazing with defiance. "You can't stop it," she spat. "Keepri's chosen are legion, the gate will open." Holmes's voice was cold. "Who are you, and who leads you? Speak, or we'll have this conversation with Scotland Yard." The woman laughed, bitter and sharp. "My name is nothing. Our leader is Kepri's voice, and you'll never find them. The fragment is ours, and the ritual is nearly complete." Watson's heart pounded. "Nearly complete? You've got no fragment now, and we've got you." Her eyes flicked to the fragment on the table, and Watson realized too late she'd been distracting them. A second shadow burst through the window, cloaked and masked, grabbing the fragment and darting back into the fog. Holmes lunged, but the figure was gone, the hum fading into the night. The woman laughed again, even as Holmes tightened his grip. "You're too slow, Holmes. The gate stirs and Kepri waits." Watson's frustration boiled over. "Holmes, they've got the fragment. The trap failed." Holmes's face was grim, but his eyes burned with resolve. "Not failed, Watson. We have her and she'll talk. The fragment's loss is a setback, but we know their desperation. Bind her hands and we'll take her to Baker Street's cellar. Tomorrow we hunt the second thief." As Watson tied the woman's wrists, Grayson whimpered, his fear palpable. The fog outside seemed to whisper Kepri, a taunt from the shadows. Holmes's trap had caught a piece of the puzzle, but Watson felt the silent gate's power growing, its ritual one step closer to completion. Chapter 20. The interrogator's game. The fire in Baker Street's sitting room had burned low, casting flickering shadows across the walls as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson faced their captive. The woman from Kepri's Chosen sat bound to a chair in the center of the room, her wrists secured with rope, her dark eyes burning with defiance despite the loss of the master basalt fragment to her accomplice. Edward Grayson had been sent upstairs to rest, his nerves frayed beyond usefulness, while Mrs. Hudson was instructed to keep the doors locked and admit no one. Watson's revolver rested on the table, its presence a silent threat, though the woman's fearless gaze unnerved him. Holmes paced slowly, his satchel on the desk, still holding the journal, Grayson's notebook, and the ledger implicating Lord Ashford. The hum of the stolen master fragment was gone, but its absence felt like a ticking clock, counting down to the silent gate's opening. Watson's frustration simmered. The trap had caught one of Kepri's Chosen, but losing the fragment was a blow. Holmes stopped pacing, fixing the woman with a piercing stare. "Your name," he said, his voice cold and precise, "and your leaders. The fragment is gone, but you're here. Talk, or Scotland Yard will have you for breaking and entering, among other charges." The woman's lips curled into a smirk, her accent faint but foreign, perhaps Middle Eastern. "Call me Amira if you must. As for my leader, you'll never reach them. Kepri's Chosen are shadows, Holmes. You can't catch what you can't see." Watson leaned forward, his patience thin. "We caught you, didn't we? You were after the fragment, ready to kill Grayson. What's the ritual? What does the gate do?" Amira's eyes flicked to Watson, her smirk fading. The gate is rebirth, a new dawn. Kepri's power will remake the world and the chosen will rise above it. The fragment you lost is the key. 5 symbols, 5 statues, 1 gate. It's too late to stop us. Holmes's expression remained unreadable, but his fingers tapped the desk, a sign his mind was racing. The riddle said blood seals the gate. Whose blood, Amira? Grayson's? The worker in Egypt or someone else? Amira's gaze hardened, but a flicker of unease crossed her face. Blood is the price, always has been. The gate demands it, and Khepri accepts it. You're wasting time, Holmes. The ritual is moving forward with or without me. Watson's stomach churned. You're talking about murder, woman. Who's your leader? Is it Ashford? Thorne? Or the woman Thorne and Grayson heard? Amira laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Ashford, he's a fool chasing relics for glory. Thorne's a coward hiding from his own discoveries. Our leader is Kepri's true voice, and you'll meet them when the gate opens, if you survive that long. Holmes stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. The chapel in the East End, the warehouse at the docks, your sanctums are exposed. The 5th statue is found, the chamber uncovered. You're running out of places to hide. Tell me where the fragment's gone or I'll tear your network apart. Amira's smirk returned, but her eyes betrayed a trace of fear. You're good, Holmes, but not that good. The fragment's already with the chosen and the ritual's nearly complete. The sanctum you found was a decoy. Our true altar is elsewhere, and you'll never find it in time. Watson's frustration boiled over. Holmes, she's stalling. We need to search the docks again or the chapel. Anywhere they might have taken the fragment. Holmes held up a hand, his eyes never leaving Amira. She's giving us more than she thinks, Watson. A true altar, she says. Not the chapel, not the warehouse, but somewhere tied to the statues. He pulled the journal from his satchel, flipping to a page with a sketch of the coiled snake symbol. The journal mentions a place of stone where the guardians were first sealed. Is your altar in London, Amira, or closer to the museum? Amira's jaw tightened, her silence louder than words. Holmes's smile was thin. Your hesitation speaks volumes. The museum, then, or near it. Watson, we'll need to search the grounds, the cellars, anywhere a hidden altar could be. Before Watson could respond, a faint creak came from the stairs, followed by a soft knock. Mrs. Hudson's voice whispered through the door. Mr. Holmes, there's someone outside in the fog. I saw a shadow by the window. Watson grabbed, his revolver moving to the window. The fog was thick, but a cloaked figure stood across the street, motionless, their face hidden. Holmes, he hissed. They're here. Kepri's chosen. Holmes glanced at Amira, whose smirk had vanished. Your friends, I presume, he said. They're bold, coming so soon after losing you. Watson, keep her secure. I'll deal with our visitor. Watson protested. Holmes, you can't go alone. It's another trap. Holmes was already at the door, his knife concealed in his sleeve. Stay with Amira, Watson. She's our leverage. If they want her back, they'll show themselves. He slipped out, the door clicking shut behind him. Watson trained his revolver on Amira, his heart pounding. If your friends try anything, you'll regret it, he said, though her calm gaze unnerved him. The fog outside muffled all sound, and the silence stretched, broken only by the clock's tick and Grayson's faint snores from upstairs. Minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. Then a sharp rap at the window made Watson jump. He spun, revolver raised, but saw only a small object on the sill, a basalt fragment etched with the jagged eye symbol humming faintly. A note was tied to it, its handwriting sharp. Return Amira, or the gate claims you all. Watson's blood ran cold. They're taunting us, he muttered, glancing at Amira. Her eyes gleamed with triumph, though she said nothing. Holmes burst, back in, his coat damp, his face grim. They're gone, Watson, slipped into the fog, but they left this. He held up another fragment, identical to the one on the sill. They're circling us, trying to unnerve us. Watson pointed to the window. Look, Holmes, another one with a note. They want her back. Holmes read the note, his expression hardening. They're desperate, Watson. The fragment's loss has slowed them, but they're close to finishing the ritual. Amira, where's the altar? Tell us, and we might negotiate. Amira's laugh was cold. Negotiate? You're out of your depth, Holmes. The altar is Kepri's heart, and the fragment is in place. The gate will open and your games will end. Holmes's eyes burned with resolve. Then we'll find it ourselves. Watson, lock her in the cellar. We're going back to the museum. The altar's there, I'm sure of it. Hidden in plain sight. Watson dragged Amira to the cellar. Her laughter echoed, chilling him. The fog outside whispered Kepri, and Watson knew the silent gate was closer than ever. Holmes's plan was bold, but Watson feared they were playing a game where Kepri's chosen held all the cards. Chapter 21. Beneath the Guardians, the fog was a living thing, curling through London streets as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson hurried toward the British Museum in the pre-dawn gloom. The interrogation of Amira had yielded little but taunts, and the chilling certainty that Kepri's chosen were close to completing their ritual. The master basalt fragment stolen from Baker Street was now in their hands, and the note left on the window, "Return Amira, or the gate claims you all," felt like a countdown. Watson's revolver was a steady weight in his pocket, but his nerves were frayed, the hum of the fragments and the whispers of Kepri haunting his thoughts. Holmes carried his satchel, still holding the journal, Grayson's notebook, the ledger, and the two new fragments left by Kepri's chosen, each etched with the jagged eye symbol. His face was set, his mind racing. "The altar is at the museum, Watson," he said, his voice cutting through the fog. Amira's slip about Kepri's heart and the journal's mention of a place of stone point to the chamber beneath the Guardians. That's where the ritual will happen. Watson's breath was visible in the cold air. "But we've searched the chamber, Holmes. The fifth statue, the altar with blood. What's left to find?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "The true altar, Watson. The one we found was a decoy meant to distract us. The riddle, 5 guard the gate, 1 waits below, suggests a deeper level, a hidden sanctum where the master fragment will be used. Kepri's chosen are there now, and we'll catch them in the act." The museum loomed ahead, its grand facade ghostly in the fog. The side door, used in their earlier visits, was ajar, its lock scratched fresh. Watson's heart quickened. "They're already here, Holmes. This is a trap." Holmes's smile was grim. "A trap will turn on them, Watson. Stay close, and keep your revolver ready." Inside, the museum was silent, the air heavy with the scent of stone and dust. They moved swiftly to the antiquities wing, where the 4 guardians stood in their circle, their blank eyes seeming to watch. The hidden staircase to the chamber was undisturbed, but Holmes paused, his lantern low, studying the floor. "Footprints," he murmured, pointing to faint scuffs in the dust, leading not to the staircase but to a nearby wall. "They've found another entrance." Watson followed Holmes as he traced the wall, tapping it with his knuckles until a hollow echo answered. A concealed panel, barely visible, clicked under Holmes's fingers, sliding open to reveal a second staircase, narrower and steeper than the first. The air from below was colder, carrying a faint hum that set Watson's teeth on edge. "Another chamber," Watson whispered, his revolver drawn. "How deep does this go?" Holmes's eyes were sharp. "As deep as Kepri's chosen need it. Tita, this is their true sanctum." He descended, lantern raised, and Watson followed, the darkness pressing close. The staircase ended in a larger chamber, its walls carved with intricate symbols, snakes, stars, moons, spirals, and jagged eyes. Glowing faintly as if lit from within, at the center stood a massive stone altar, its surface etched with the 5 symbols and stained with fresh blood. The master fragment rested on it, humming loudly, its symbols pulsing in time with the chamber's vibrations. 5 cloaked figures stood around the altar, chanting in a low, rhythmic tongue, their faces hidden by masks. Watson's heart pounded. "Holmes, they're starting the ritual." Holmes signaled for silence, crouching behind a stone pillar. One figure, taller than the others, stood at the altar's head, their voice a woman's, sharp, commanding, with the same accent Amira had. "The gate stirs," she said, raising a knife over the fragment. "Kipri's blood is given, and—" "The way opens," Watson whispered. "That's her, the leader. We need to stop them now." Holmes nodded, his hand on his concealed knife. "On my signal, Watson. Aim for their legs. Disable, don't kill. We need answers." He counted softly. 3, 2, 1, Watson fired, the shot echoing as one figure collapsed, clutching their knee. Holmes lunged, tackling another, his knife pinning their cloak to the floor. The chamber erupted in chaos, the remaining figures scattering, their chants breaking into shouts. The leader grabbed the master fragment, darting toward a tunnel at the chamber's rear. "After her!" Holmes shouted, shoving his captive aside and giving chase. Watson followed, his revolver ready, as the tunnel twisted deeper into the earth. The hum grew deafening, the walls vibrating, and Watson felt a pressure like the air itself was resisting them. The tunnel opened into a smaller chamber, dominated by a massive stone gate, its surface carved with the 5 symbols and glowing, with an eerie light. The leader stood before it, the master fragment raised, her voice rising in a chant. "Kepri, awaken, the gate is yours." Holmes tackled her, wrestling the fragment from her grasp, but the gate shuddered, a deep rumble, shaking the chamber. Dust fell and the whispers of Kepri became a roar echoing from the stone. Watson fired a warning shot, the bullet ricocheting off the gate, and the leader broke free, slipping into another tunnel as the chamber began to collapse. "Holmes, we need to go," Watson yelled, grabbing his friend's arm. Holmes clutched the fragment, his face grim, and they ran back through the tunnel, the ground trembling beneath them. They reached the main chamber where the other figures had fled, leaving their wounded behind. They scrambled up the staircase, bursting into the antiquities wing as the rumble faded. The guardians stood silent, but Watson felt their presence, as if they'd witnessed the chaos below. Holmes panted, holding the master fragment tightly. "We stopped them, Watson, for now. But the gate, it's active." Watson's heart raced. "That woman, she's still out there, Holmes. And the gate, it nearly opened." "What is it?" Holmes's eyes were hard. "A power we don't yet understand. The fragment's back with us, but Kepri's chosen won't stop. We need to find her, their leader. She's the key." As they left the museum, the fog seemed to pulse with the name Kepri. Watson knew the ritual had been delayed, but the silent gate was awake, and Kepri's chosen were still in the shadows, waiting for their next move.